Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to this morning's BCP Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Kelsey and I will be chairing this meeting this morning. The first thing for me to do is to pass to Jill Hollyoak to read out the housekeeping notices, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note this meeting of the Planning Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chairman in case of disruption. For those in the room, if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point under the Brady Road flyover. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Please note that this includes members' laptops. Please turn off laptop cameras and microphones and turn the volume all the way down to ensure there is no disruption or feedback during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. So committee members today, we have myself, Councillor Kelsey, Vice Chairman, Councillor Johnson. We have Councillor Steve Barron, Councillor Derek Borthwick, Councillor Simon Bull, Councillor Malcolm Davies, Councillor Peter Hall, Councillor Paul Hilliard, Councillor Bob Lawton, Councillor Marion Lepedevin, Councillor Simon McCormack, Councillor Tony O'Neill, Councillor Felicity Rice and Councillor Tony Trent. We have a selection of officers with us working this morning, including Mr Nick Perrins, Head of Planning, David Hodges, Team Leader, Steve Llewellyn, who is Team Leader, and there are several other officers that will be presenting their cases along with legal people, Tanya Coulter and Robert Firth, and we have Jill Hollyoak from Democratic Services. We also have additional technical officers who may be called upon to participate for other reasons. Moving on to the agenda for this morning's meeting, do we have any apologies, please, Jill?
We've had apologies from Councillor George Farquhar and there are no substitute members.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Does any member of this committee have any declarations of interest on items on the agenda today? Councillor Hall.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on land, on 6A, land south of Jesmond Road, I will leave the meeting for this application.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Any further declarations of interest? No? In that case, we will move on to confirmation of minutes. Do committee members agree to me signing the minutes for the meeting of the 17th of November, please? Thank you very much. And public issues. After each officer presentation on each application, we will hear public speakers followed by ward councillors and other councillors who wish to speak. Before we move on, I know there are a couple of contentious issues on the agenda today, and I would ask members of the public and all members if we could please show courtesy to each other by not interrupting or barracking while any particular person is speaking. Thank you. So we will move on to the schedule of planning applications, and the first item this morning is item 6A, which is land south of Jesmond Avenue, Highcliffe in Christchurch. Councillor Hall, if you'd like to lead the room, thank you. And I would ask Sophie Maudsley if you could present your case, please, Sophie.
Thank you, Chairman. Can everyone see my screen?
We can, thank you, Sophie.
Okay, thank you. I apologise in advance. I'm slightly croaky, but I'll try not to start coughing. So members, this application is at Jesmond Avenue. It involves the erection of 16 residential dwellings, the creation of a new vehicular access, upgrading the existing path, provision of landscape communal open space and associated infrastructure. I'd also like to refer members to the addendum sheet, which was published yesterday. In terms of the location, the application site lies within the urban area between Lymington Road, the main route into Highcliffe district centre, and the residential estate to the north. This parcel of land is currently occupied by a broadleafed woodland and acts as a green corridor for the movement of wildlife, linking Near Meadows to the west and Chewton Common to the east. It is also identified as part of the Dorset Ecological Network, as well as being covered by a tree preservation order. Moving on to flood risk, Chewton Common stream runs along Jesmond Avenue in a culvert and then as an open stream to the east of the application site. As you can see, the northern frontage of the site is within current flood zone 2, as shown by the light blue on the slide. In 2018, updated modelling took place, which modified the flood zones. The layout of the development has taken account of this of these zones, and the properties are set back and located beyond the flood risk areas. In addition, the floor levels of the properties will be raised up to provide further mitigation. Members may have noted the objection from the Environment Agency in the addendum sheet, and this is purely on foul drainage issues and not on flood risk. Here we have the proposed site plan. There are 6 properties fronting Jesmond Avenue, 4 facing the permissive path between Lymington Road and Greenways, and 6 within the new internal courtyard area in the western part of the site. The layout has been constrained by the flood zone at the frontage, the tree coverage on site, and the need to retain a green corridor through the site on the southern boundary. The site lies within each dwelling has 2 parking spaces, equating to 32 spaces overall. This is an over provision within Zone B, however, it is considered to be acceptable. Each unit has cycle parking, and whilst there is some concern from BCP Highways on the access to the cycle parking, it is considered that there's sufficient space within each plot to provide adequate parking, and it could be dealt with by condition if approved. There is a new path proposed through the woodland, where my cursor is now, to allow public access into this area, which it currently does not. I will come back to the ecological issues later in the presentation. However, this plan shows the proposed green corridor along the southern boundary, along with the wider ecological areas within the retained parts of the woodland. Plot 1 is positioned on the front corner of the site. You can see from the plan here. It is a 4-bed property with accommodation across 3 floors. You can see the contemporary design that has been adopted, which sees the use of brick, zinc cladding, oak-coloured composite cladding, and slate. Plot 6 is located within the on the far eastern side of the development. As you can see, it's set further back than the adjacent properties. This is due to flood risk. Each property across the site has an open carport and a shed for cycle parking. Number 12 is located adjacent to the boundary with number 61 Greenways. This is a 4-bed property with accommodation in the roof space. The glazing on the northern elevation addressing the side of 61 is obscure glazed and serves the stairwell at first and second floor level. And the 2 roof lights you can see serve the bedroom and ensuite. It's in this elevation here. Plot 16 was in the western area of the site. You will have seen that the properties have relatively small amenity areas and relatively modest footprints for these 4-bedroom properties. This is a response to the woodland setting and the need to minimise the impact on the surrounding trees. The design form and the materials and resulting character of the development is different to the character of the residential estate to the north, which is characterised by bungalows and chalet bungalows being the predominant type of housing. While it's appreciated these new dwellings would have a greater scale than the surrounding properties, it considered that the designers responded to the sylvan setting of the site and created its own character. By reducing footprints, this has resulted in 2.5 stories properties to provide the required accommodation. It is not considered the design approach as a harmful impact on the visual amenities of the area. Here we just have some street scenes. This is the northern edge of the site, addressing Greenways and Jesmond Avenue. BB illustrates the view from the footpath through the site, so this view here, and DD shows the houses in the western section of the site. As you can see, these sections show how the land rises up from Greenways and Jesmond Avenue towards Lymington Road. AA at the top is similar to the previous DD section, however, that you can see this section shows the relationship with the adjacent bungalows. And BB highlights the medical centre, which is this building here to the south, and bungalows on Greenways, which are positioned here. In terms of trees, it is proposed to fell 245 trees across the site. However, it should be noted that of these, 238 are category C or U trees. This plan shows the one category A, which is a turkey oak, to be removed, and the other 4 highlighted ones are the category B trees, so 2 English oak, a sycamore and a beech. The footprints of the properties are all outside the root protection zones of the remaining trees, and all of the trees are positioned outside of the private amenity areas. The applicant is willing to secure a landscape and environmental management plan to cover the management and ongoing maintenance of the woodland outside of the developed area. A landscape strategy has been put forward to mitigate the loss of trees as well as to add value to the woodland. This involves 95 new trees, 106 metres of new native hedgerow, native shrub planting, meadow grass and flowering lawn. However, as you can see from the committee report, despite the above proposed mitigation and the low quality of a significant proportion of the trees on the site, it is considered that the level of tree loss will have an adverse impact on the character of the area. The verdant edge to the residential estate would be diminished, and the valuable contribution this woodland makes to the visual amenities of the locality would be eroded. In addition, whilst effort has been made to try and design a scheme which responds to the woodland setting and surrounding mature trees, it's considered that the proximity of trees to private amenity spaces and the properties will place future pressure on the trees, given their likely impact on light levels within gardens and the rear of properties. Therefore, overall, officers consider that the development is contrary to policies HE2 and HE3 of the local plan. Moving on to biodiversity, it is clear that the site has biodiversity value by providing not only a foraging area for wildlife, but as a green corridor for the movement of wildlife in this urban area. The proposal before us has tried to retain an appropriate corridor and sufficient space within the woodland to minimise harm on wildlife and their habitat. However, it is considered that given the extent of loss of woodland and therefore the functionality of the green corridor, the proposal fails to protect the quality and integrity of this woodland habitat site. Whilst the direct impact on protected species can be mitigated, the overall impact on the habitats and foraging routes of wildlife, in our opinion, cannot be avoided, sufficiently mitigated or compensated for. Natural England have not raised an outright objection to the scheme, but as you can see from the report, the Council's biodiversity officer is clearly objecting to the application. The applicant has set out that they consider they can achieve 29.5% biodiversity net gain through various measures such as new trees, removal of invasive non-native species, new hedgerows, bat roosting and bird nesting features, bee bricks, new understory shrub planting and loggeries for stag beetles. Bear with me. There are questions over whether this percentage is actually achievable and also the actual quality of the existing woodland. It is appreciated that a net gain percentage is not currently mandatory in policy. However, given the clear ecological function of this land, it is vital that any scheme must protect the ecological interests of the site and provide an element of net gain. Overall, it is considered that the scheme is contrary to policies ME1 and ENV 15 of the local plan. Just briefly turning to surface water management, you can see the site is subject to some surface water flooding by this map here. To mitigate this, detention basins are proposed within the woodland area, and each property would have a crated storage denoted by the yellow squares. In terms of affordable housing, 40% on-site affordable housing has not been deemed viable. However, the applicant has agreed a financial contribution in lieu of the 3 units which were considered viable. This could be secured by 106. The Dorset Heathland Sand payment could also be secured through a legal agreement if it were to be approved. On the addendum sheet, you will have seen an extra reason for refusal on phosphates. Members will be aware that work is currently being carried out to find a mitigation and solution to this issue. However, given the recommendation to refuse, it needs to be included as a refusal reason. Just moving on to some photographs of the site. These show some street frontages from Greenways and Jesmond Avenue. These are some of the images provided by the applicant in their submission documentation. So they were taken September last year within the site. These are my photos taken from summer this year following ground clearance works. And this is the western part of the site. And again, this is the eastern side of the site taken this summer. And this is the property on Jesmond Avenue. And this is the southern boundary looking from Lymington Road towards the existing footpath, which links this Lymington Road to Jesmond Avenue and Greenways. And this is the footpath through the site, which will be retained as part of the development. In conclusion, the scheme is considered to have an adverse impact on the landscape character due to the significant tree loss within the woodland. The proposed relationships between the dwellings and trees is likely to result in future pressure on the trees. The development is very likely to erode the ecological function of this woodland habitat, reducing space for the movement of wildlife and foraging opportunities. Despite the current housing supply issues and the benefits of the scheme, as identified in the report, these two issues are considered to outweigh the benefits, and therefore the proposal remains contrary to the development plan and the MPPF. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Sophie. Give your voice a rest now for a little while, I hope. Jill, do we have any speakers, please?
Thank you. Yes, we'll deal with objectors first. The first speaker is Adam Sofianos. If you'd like to come forward, Adam. Adam's requested that 2 images be displayed on the screen, which the case officer is going to facilitate.
So thank you very much, Chair and members. So you have an excellent report from the officer today with a clear recommendation to refuse. I support that report and I'm coming to you as a local parish councillor. As you know, every environmental consultee has refused to support this application with major objections from council's own officers. The proposal would devastate a protected wildlife corridor, removing up to 86% of the north to south breadth of the woodlands. But it's not just about the loss of space. You see, Jesmond Wood contains a wealth of biodiversity. The applicant's own surveys names 22 different tree species and dozens of other plants, many of them rare. Add to this 7 species of endangered bat, 11 of endangered birds, slow worms, grass snakes, and so on. All here because of what Jesmond Wood is today, a biodiversity haven. What if I could get the next slide, please? Thank you. As for the trees, the amended proposal now has a profile equivalent to the plan refused last year. But last year, the amount of trees to be lost was not 27%, but 55%. Now, we haven't seen an updated percentage from the applicant, but I calculate the majority of trees are at risk. So what would be left here? Well, the main feature would be a man-made pathway just 7 to 10 metres wide, stuck between a row of backyards and the health centre car park. No wonder Natural England still refuses to support it. This plan would clearly deliver a huge loss in biodiversity. Yet this isn't shown in the applicant's biodiversity metric document, which seems to miss significant data points, such as the existing ecology. But there cannot be a net gain for habitat loss on this scale. The harms would significantly and demonstrably outweigh any benefits. Jesmond Wood is irreplaceable. Its loss cannot be mitigated. Approval today would also set a terrible precedent across BCP, because if Jesmond Wood cannot be protected, what can? Finally, this plan stands against every green policy we have and every green ambition of the council, and I kindly ask you all to refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And the second objection is a written statement provided by Mr. Richard Dickinson. I would like to object again to this planning application and highlight the following. 1. This is the 4th application for building on this woodland. Despite that, 230 individuals have taken the time and effort to object to this further application. This is a considerable number of mainly local residents who feel very strongly that this development is clearly not in the public interest. 2. If approved, 245 trees will have to be felled. That equates to 15.3 trees per house. How is that justifiable? The council are intending to plant 10,000 trees this year to help combat climate change and environmental damage. It seems somewhat obtuse to approve a planning application that results in the reduction of so many trees for so little benefit and the destruction of a valuable green corridor for wildlife. 3. There can be no improvement in biodiversity by the human race destroying nature and offering a placatory effort in replacing that. Nature is far superior to the human race in this matter, no matter how hard we try. 4. The developer has shown scant regard to the planning regulations by erecting unauthorised fencing and the environment by destroying large chunks of the woodland already. There is no confidence that the developer would not seek to cause further damage and renege on their obligations. 5. The only person to benefit if the scheme is approved is the developer. There is no public benefit in the destruction of a valuable and now rare woodland. 6. The Highway Authority report, stored on the 11th of October, is incorrect as it states that Jesmond Avenue, quote, is without a high degree of parking stress present, unquote. Jesmond Avenue has on weekdays 20 to 30 cars parked on the road as it is used as a car park for the medical staff and for shoppers unwilling to pay for parking. In summary, the Planning Officer's report makes it clear that this application is in breach of policies HE2, HE3, ME1, ME2, KS11, KS12 and provisions of the National Planning Policy Framework. On that basis, I would urge all the councillors to refuse this application. Thank you. Speaking in support, Jacqueline Mulliner of Terence O'Rourke.
Thank you all. Good morning. I'm going to take this opportunity to cover two matters. First, the planning background, which does have some bearing on the application. Second, and although I have the greatest respect for your officers, to explain why they have the planning balance wrong on this occasion. The outcome should have been a positive recommendation, and this committee would be entirely justified in resolving to grant permission. The fact is, this site would have been developed with the rest of the housing estate some years ago, had it not been compulsory purchased by the council from my client's family for the provision of a bypass. Some years later, the site was repurchased after the bypass was abandoned. Initially, the council dictated that it must be developed for housing to maximum density, but from the planning history, you will see this was unsuccessful. This new application takes a completely different approach, respecting the site characteristics and minimising tree loss with a bespoke scheme of reduced density. If the bypass had been built, there would be few, if any, trees on this site. It is entirely right that the site is in a highly sustainable location within the urban area. Significantly, the site is not open to public access, is fenced off, overgrown and in poor condition, with an abundance of invasive species. The site is currently of some concern to your Highways Department, who have served a notice on my client to cut back boundary trees, despite the DPO and your tree office objection to the loss of any trees. Further, the site is not and will not be designated as local green space, a designation sought by the Parish Council solely to frustrate its development. Put simply, the neighbourhood plan examiner could not conclude that the designation would meet the basic conditions, instead acknowledging the potential for much needed housing in a sustainable location in accordance with core strategy policy KS4. The examiner highlighted the acute shortfall in housing land supply, that being only 2.7 years. This brings me to the planning balance. The tilted planning balance applies. Harm must significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits if planning permission is to be withheld. To address harm, the concerns of potential harm asserted by both Dorset Wildlife Trust and your ecology officer are not significant nor demonstrable. They are based on ambiguity, hunch, a lack of understanding of the role of a management company, and a lack of confidence in the council's own powers to protect EPO trees in future. None of the concerns raised are evidenced, i.e. demonstrable. None are significant. On the contrary, the applicant has carefully considered the site's value and put forward proposals to deliver almost 30% biodiversity net gain, reversing its progressive decline. Also securing a scheme that loses only 4 quality trees, but includes provisions to plant 95 native trees and to introduce active management to encourage existing and new trees to grow into good condition. In terms of protected species, Natural England has not objected, and I've already referenced tree loss and additional planting. I will add that all of the trees on site will be within the communal or public areas and subject to professional management. Individual homeowners will not have responsibility or control. This is entirely different to Steamer Point. Comparison should not be drawn. The proposition that concerns about future pressures are sound and justified is not evidenced or supported by the proposals before you, including management provisions that would be made through conditions in section 106. Then in terms of the benefits, undoubtedly the delivery of housing in a sustainable location where planning policies support housing is a significant benefit of substantial weight. Undoubtedly the delivery of housing in itself, given the housing land supply shortfall, must be given substantial weight. This weighting is supported by numerous planning appeal decisions and is a matter that has been wrongly underweighted by your officers. The development is acknowledged to be of high quality, and I would point to the involvement of TOR's award-winning architects and landscape architects who are used to dealing with constrained sites. They would not form an unacceptable scheme, and in this regard I draw your attention to the success of St Stephen's Road, which is similarly set amongst the trees. The scheme is bespoke and of the highest quality. It has been embraced by my clients, and I would highlight national policy which requires innovative designs which promote high levels of sustainability or help raise the standard of design in an area to be given significant weight. This is exactly the case here. There are other benefits, economic, recreational and general improvement in the site's condition. The development plan policies do not prohibit the development of the site. Cumulatively, the many benefits carry substantial weight. Conversely, the significant harm asserted by officers is unsupported by the evidence and not demonstrable. I've got one sentence.
Go on.
There can only be one answer to the planning balance: to grant permission. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. We have ward councillors with us in the room this afternoon, and I would first ask if Councillor Andy Martin would like to come forward and speak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to address you today. I'd also like to thank Sophie Maudsley for her authoritative and comprehensive report, and I thank her for her conclusions. It's an appropriate day for this application to come before the committee because the residents of Highcliffe and Walkford are going to the polls as we speak in the referendum on our neighbourhood plan. The residents in that 3-year plan process, in the consultation carried out ahead of today's vote, and the many hundreds of people I've spoken to in the last few months, for obvious reasons, all place the very highest premium on safeguarding our local green spaces. I do not believe it's any exaggeration to say that Jesmond Wood is one of the most important planning applications in the history of Highcliffe, maybe the most important. As a Dorset County councillor between 1985 and 1993, I was one of those who voted to remove the Highcliffe bypass from the list of major highway proposals, and rightly so. From that decision, we now have our unique and vital green corridor, and this has been carefully protected by every local plan since. Yes, Jesmond Wood was once set to be a bypass, but that was nearly 5 decades ago. Today, we live in a very different world in which we are all now very much more aware of the value of our natural environment. Let me please pick up a point that was made by the applicant's representative, that this site is not and will not be designated local green space. I'm not sure how she knows that. In fact, I think there's every likelihood that a review of the neighbourhood plan in future, if it's approved today, will see that designation reinstated. And as a matter of note, The examiner also said he felt Jesmond Wood was adequately protected by other policies, which is why he declined, one of the reasons he declined to put it into the neighbourhood plan. Mr. Chairman, there's a great deal at stake today. Jesmond Wood must be protected for its own sake and for the sake of that vital green corridor that runs the length of Highcliffe, as Ms. Maudsley has pointed out. If we lose Jesmond Wood to housing, we may as well say goodbye in the longer term to the rest of this vital, irreplaceable network. What message would it send across the conurbation about the value we attach to our precious woodland and our local green spaces? 3 brief points among the many I could make. 1, the trees, the loss of 245 trees would be a disaster, and the remaining trees would remain under significant threat. There is no certainty with the future of those trees, and those fears are sound and justified. 2, Natural England says that the application area is of value because of its established woodland features and its position both in an urban area, but also as a functioning ecological link. Again, the phrase no certainty comes to mind, that the mitigation measures proposed are sufficient or will be successful in maintaining the integrity of that corridor. It is clear they would not. And 3, the loss of woodland will have an impact on the habitats and foraging routes of wildlife that, quote, cannot be avoided, satisfactorily mitigated or compensated for in line with the NPPF. Mr. Sofianos has already mentioned the abundant richness of wildlife in Jesmond Wood. Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of talk about mitigation, but mitigation here is a complete myth. I call it mythigation. This development on Jesmond Wood will ultimately destroy it, the habitat and the wildlife corridor. We know that, and the applicant knows it as well. And we don't need it. There are 875 new homes coming on stream at Rowshot Hill, a mile from this site. There are a number of other potential sites identified in BCP Council's issues and options document published earlier this year by this council. And by the way, there are numerous sites already under construction within a few hundred yards of this site. Highcliffe is taking its share of development. This application is not sustainable, and any so-called benefits are far outweighed by the irreparable environmental harm. We are more aware than ever of the value of trees to our urban environment. Our trees and green spaces make us happier and healthier, and thus improving the quality of life in an urban environment, not fewer. COP26 and 27 have made trees a priority, and the UK has one of the lowest levels of tree cover in Europe. The Woodland Trust says this country is facing slow motion deforestation, and I would say that the ultimate destruction of Jesmond Wood would be a classic and tragic example of that. BCP Council is currently conducting its conurbation-wide tree and woodland survey to help gather residents' views on how to best encourage and manage local trees and woodlands to, I quote, make BCP a better place to live, work and visit. Mr. Chairman, saving and protecting Jesmond Wood and our green corridor is a very good place to start, and I urge the committee to do just that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. And Councillor Leslie Dedman, please.
Apologies for my back view. Might be my best view. Thank you, Chairman. Well, can I start by saying that this planning application has certainly been around the houses over the years, and it's now been called into committee, despite being recommended for refusal, actually not by a ward councillor or me when I was picking up the late Councillor Guerra's work while he was dying. I'm sure Councillor Hall had his reasons. One of the reasons he gives, that it's in the public interest, absolutely right. This site has been very much in the public interest for years. I've known it since DCC days, obviously, never more so than at the present time. The history is well known in Hampshire and Dorset, and although maybe not so much in Bournemouth and Poole. As we've heard, it was to be part of a bypass. This was never the wish of the people, and there never was a bypass, as we now know. So it's been a valued part of our green space for years, and valued not only by residents, but by the wildlife. Can I just interject one thing here, that a lot of the photographs you saw were after the applicant had cleared a lot of the ground cover, which had little birds nesting in it and various other species. So it's right that it's in the public interest. Other reasons given for the call-in. I'm not sure that it would have had to come to committee anyway, because of a clause on this site which benefits BCP if it's granted, which I remember from my time on the county council, which has not been mentioned, and maybe I shouldn't mention it now. Anyway, the other reasons Councillor Hall gives I can't agree with. 17 new homes could help with our housing needs. Our housing figures on this conurbation are inflated. This is being vigorously challenged, and I believe the government have changed their own rules on this anyway. And this tiny, constrained site is not far from a huge planned development on former Greenbelt of 900 homes, various shapes and sizes, which will be the site which will, not could, help with any housing needs. And the borough, when I was on that, was actually more or less forced to give up that Greenbelt site to reduce crowding, such as this little site that we're talking about today. So I don't think that this site can help with housing needs, and it's certainly not a reason for destruction of the woods. Councillor Hall says it may improve the biodiversity. Sorry, but I mean how? By destroying old established woodland, in its place putting a nice, tidy, urban space, a few bushes, a new path, the usual anodyne effort with a few back boxes of the developer. Our officer says in her report, proposed mitigation measures to overcome this loss of habitat are not sufficient to mitigate the harm caused. The call-in also cites various saved policies from our local plan, all the HEs, KS1 and CH4. But our officer, and whose ruling, unlike the applicant, I actually respect, cites other policies rebutting these. KS11 and 12 holds it contrary to ENV 15, ME1, HE2, HE3 and H12. Now, I don't wish to tell the committee its business. I won't go into details. I know you all know what those policies are. I think these policies, which are given as reasons for refusal, far outweigh those cited in the call-in. In fact, one of them is directly opposed by the officer. So, Chairman, I'm winding up to say that really, my point is this call-in has no merit. Apart from any council benefit which may accrue from the site, this proposal should be refused on all the grounds given by the officer, especially point 137 in your papers, which shows the harm arising significantly outweighs the benefits. So taking all this into account, and of course all the reasons given by the other speakers and the person who wrote in, all the residents who have written in, I ask the committee to refuse this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Devon. Thank you. So, members, you've heard from the objectors from the applicants. Firstly, Sophie, is there anything that you've heard that you would like to come back on, please?
Thank you, Chairman. No, not at this time.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Okay, open to members. Who wants to kick off? Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go on long and repeat what other members have said, but it's clearly obvious to me that the amount of nature that would be either destroyed or taken away here does not outweigh the amount of homes that are going on here. So I don't think the tilted balance in this case really counts. Miss Morsley's done a very good job in her recommendation of putting out some really robust reasons for refusal, and so for that reason I would like to propose early on that this is refused as set out by Miss Morsley.
Thank you, Councillor McCormick. I'll ask if there is an immediate seconder, but I would like to just continue the debate a little bit after that. Councillor Hilliard, you're happy to second?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Would you like to speak now, Councillor Hilliard, or wait?
No, I'll wait. Thanks.
Thank you. So next speaker is Councillor Barron, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. I should have declared a slight local interest in that many years ago, this is over 20 years ago, I was a tree and landscape officer at Christchurch Council. However, I wasn't involved putting any TPOs on this actual site, so I'm comfortable to sit on this application.
Thank you. We'll just note that in the minutes first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've looked at the application online, and there's so many objections. I didn't actually have time to count how many there were, so I'd just be quite interested to know how many objections were logged on the application, and also how many in favour. And I'd also like to know what kind of TPO covers the site, if it's an area order, an individual, or a woodland. If it's an area order, I'd like to know how old it is. And I'd also like to know if the clearance work required consent, and if there's any breaches in any TPO coverage on there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sophie, did you hear those questions?
I think so. I might have to bring in our tree and landscape officer, B. Ridley, to help me, but I'll start off. We received 233 objections and 3 letters of support in total. Just touching on the clearance works, as far as I'm aware, and as Ridley will confirm, there were no works done to any of the trees when that took place. It was literally just ground clearance. But we obviously did investigate that at the time. But yeah, B, I don't know if you wanted to step in and mention the TPO.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, there's 2 on the site. The first order is 1983, and that's number 29, and that covers several different species, and that covers A3 and A4, the TPO plan. The other area order is 2017, number 5, and that's whatever species. So the ground clearance, as Sophie said, we looked into it, and the majority was vegetation and did not impact on the established trees on site.
Right, okay, that's okay. I just wanted to establish it wasn't a woodland order, because if it
No,
was,
no,
yeah,
no,
okay,
it's not.
Okay. Well,
No.
Just a bit shocked to hear the speaker in support saying that the scheme minimised tree loss. I couldn't help but sort of find that, well, it isn't a funny subject at all, but I just actually couldn't believe what I was hearing there. I definitely support the move to refuse on this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Trent, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to be boring, but I think this point needs to be made every time we look at a planning application. But if this was granted before mitigation kicks in, there would be around 800 years of lost carbon capture. As I've sort of said in the past, it takes 30 years for a new tree to start to capture the carbon out of the atmosphere, and I really think we need to take this into account. I don't think this is taken seriously enough by enough people. Personally, although I think the design is better than some I've seen, I don't think that it is justified, and I do support the recommendation to refuse, but I just really wanted to make the point about the significance of the loss of trees, even if half of them or thereabouts would ultimately be replaced, but it takes 30 years to get any benefit from the replacements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. I think that's a point very well made, and it's one that all of us here are beginning to come more and more to terms with as we move on with the environmental impact on things. Councillor O'Neill, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the developer of the design and intention of the development. I think in many ways it's praiseworthy. However, the conclusion I arrive at is trees act as a natural barrier between areas of housing, which adds value to resident occupation and well-being, and that shouldn't be ignored. I think it's also true that this is a green and ecological corridor to the advantage of wildlife, and that shouldn't be ignored. Development of this scale would simply interrupt the natural flow and established flow of the wildlife currently in occupation, and that does concern me. I think in addition, the design of the properties themselves in their intended area is in part out of character with the buildings surrounding, which are largely bungalows, dormer bungalows, chalet bungalow. And for those reasons, the ecological impact in particular, the effect it would have on its occupation and the natural flow, I would support refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Councillor Lawton.
I'm concerned about the loss of habitat. I'm concerned about the loss of trees, and I'm extremely concerned about how it contravenes a number of planning policies. So therefore, I shall be supporting Councillor McCormack's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Le Pedevin, please.
Thank you. I'll slightly echo what Councillor O'Neill has just said, that I think the plans have done their best to use this site in a responsible way. If this was a brownfield site, I would not have much issue, well, probably wouldn't have any issue with it. The question is, if this site is going to be developed, this is probably, or could well be, as good as it gets. The question is whether the site should be developed at all, which is not something we can say as a planning committee, but clearly that is definitely the feeling of those of us present and many of the objectors and those who've spoken. So as I say, if it's going to be developed, this is probably as good as it'll get, but it shouldn't be developed.
Thank you, Councillor Le Pedevin. Councillor Johnson. Or...
No, I think that I'm not going to go into what's already been said because I agree with the vast majority of it wholeheartedly. I just wanted to clear a couple of things up. Precedent was mentioned. Obviously, there's no precedent in planning. We can turn this down and accept another application that comes in on this site. Our decisions can't be based on the council's wider economic policies. We've just got to consider the ones that are planning and planning only. But frankly, I think that's more than enough to refuse this application in this case. If the site's biodiversity is struggling to the level that the applicant was stating in their deputation, I'm a little surprised they haven't applied to level the entire wood and develop the entire thing if it's in that much of a bad state at the moment. And I certainly can't see how it can be claimed there's a nearly 30% biodiversity net gain when you've got a net loss of 150 trees and you're narrowing a green corridor by almost 3/4. It looks like in the plans. I can't see how that makes any sort of sense. So I'll be wholeheartedly supporting the motion to refuse and commend the officer for their report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to refuse for the reasons mentioned, but I just wanted to state that going on from Councillor Le Pedevin's comment about being on a brownfield site, even if that was developed on brownfield site, I would prefer to see, well, I don't quite understand why the council is suggesting that over provision of car parking spaces is appropriate. So from a planning point of view and the developer's point of view, I would prefer to be seeing more green cover instead of over provision of unsustainable transport provision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hilliard, would you like to come in? There are no other speakers registered.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think it's all been said before, but I think the main thing to stress is that this was down to refuse by the officer. It shouldn't have come to committee. I know you've raised this before when people call in and you say, if a councillor's not here to give the evidence of why he's called it in, then it's not. So it should be questioned why it was called in, and obviously a reminder to all councillors. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hilliard. I think it would have come to us anyway because the amounts of reps that came in on it, but I totally understand your point there, and it's something, as you know, I do rattle on about for quite a lot about call-ins and people not speaking, etc. I think on this application, in my mind, everyone that's come here to object to this application this morning has hit the nail right on the head on absolutely every point they've raised. And I praise tremendously the people that took the time to come in and speak. and all of the objectors for writing in on this. It's really good when people actually follow up their objections with coming in person to speak. There was an unfortunate use of media earlier in the year when the Vice Chairman and myself were slaughtered for something on this site that was not within our remit. It's unfortunate when that happens, but I do fully support Councillor McCormick's proposals to refuse this one. And I would like to say that I think myself and most of us in this room think that our officers do an extremely professional job. The report that was written today by Sophie is one of the best I've seen for a long time. It's so detailed, and I think she should really be highly commended for that report. So thank you very much, Sophie. It's really appreciated when you make it so easy for us to understand a report like you have on this one. So we have a motion by Councillor McCormick to refuse this application for the reasons stated in the officer's report, and I will call names individually, and if you could state whether you are for or against that move, please. Councillor Barron.
For.
Councillor Borthwick. Councillor Bull.
For.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Hall. Sorry, not voting. Councillor Hilliard.
For.
Councillor Lawton.
For.
Councillor Lepedevin.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
Councillor O'Neill.
For.
Councillor Rice.
For.
Councillor Trent.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
And myself also for that move. So in my poor maths, that makes that decision unanimous, and that application is refused in line with the officer's recommendations. Thank you very much for everyone that took part in that one. We will now move on to the second application, but we'll just wait for a few minutes while people leave the rooms. Okay, members, we're all back in session again. Thank you for that. Moving on to the next application this morning, and that is item 6B, which is Broadstone Middle School in Broadstone. And I would ask Monica to present her case, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So planning permission is sought for the variation of conditions 3 and 8 of the original planning consent to erect an outdoor learning resource centre at Broadstone Middle School. That was granted by Planning Committee in July 2022. This application is brought before committee again as the approved development is of a major category and it's situated on a council land, and also it has been previously approved by committee. So just to remind members, Broadstone Middle School is located on the northern side of Daniels Road in Broadstone. The school buildings are set back from the road on the lower level, screened by the trees to the frontage. The approved SCND Learning Centre is to be located in this location showed by the red arrow, which is directly behind this little bungalow, which is a caretaker's bungalow and also used as a school office. The proposal is to remove 3 silver birch trees, T2 and T3G, which is a group of trees, which were previously proposed to be retained. It is advised that these trees are category C trees and some of them are damaged, and they'll be close to the approved SCND building and the excavations that are scheduled and approved within their root protection areas, and those would potentially further damage those trees. The applicant is proposing to remove those trees and replace them with 3 new trees, which will be planted further away from the approved SCND building. As a result, the applicant is asking to vary the approved conditions 3 and 8. Condition 3 requires the compliance with the previously approved arboricultural method statement and tree protection plan, unless it's otherwise agreed in writing with the local planning authority. And the reason for that condition is to prevent trees on site or on adjacent land from being damaged during construction works in accordance with policy PP 27. Condition 8 is a condition requiring the approved scheme to be implemented in accordance with the approved plans and the reports. The approved arboricultural drawings are proposed to be amended only on the list of the approved plans. So the trees proposed for the removal are, as I said before, of categories C1 and C2, and they are being a low quality, with T2 being damaged as well. These trees are also not protected by a tree preservation order. So in accordance with British standards, category C trees are smaller trees or those considered to be of low quality. They may have a limited life expectancy or contribute very little to the amenity of the area. So British standards advise that these trees should not be considered a constraint to development, and their removal should be generally accepted. So obviously the scheme was assessed by the council's arboricultural officer, who confirmed that these trees proposed for removal are indeed low quality specimens and of low amenity value, and they should not be seen as a constraint to the delivery of the approved scheme. Notwithstanding this, the loss of these trees, whilst acceptable in general, should be adequately mitigated to ensure long-term planting benefit on site and appropriate contribution to the sylvan character of the area. So replacement planting in the form of 3 new trees, as shown on the plan with the green dots, so either silver birch, maple or English oak trees, is shown to be proposed to mitigate the loss of the trees in this location. The mitigation planting is supported by the council's arboricultural officer, and it can be conditioned accordingly by new condition number 9. The revised arboricultural submission adequately protects the trees that would be retained on site. The implementation of the revised arboricultural information can be also secured by revised condition 3, and subject to those conditions, the scheme is supported by the council's arboricultural officer. The proposed removal of the trees would have no impact on the openness of the nearby green belt, the setting of the nearby conservation areas, as previously assessed and accepted. It will also the proposal would also remain policy compliance with regards to the matters of parking, highway safety, biodiversity, waste, drainage, and renewable energy sources. The proposal would have no additional impact on the overall appearance of the approved scheme, its scale and siting. It will also continue to preserve residential amenities of the neighbours in line with the approved scheme. So in view of the above assessment, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to revised conditions 3 and 8, new condition 9, and all other conditions previously imposed by the original planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. Jill.
Chairman, there are no registered speakers for this item.
Thank you very much. In that case, we'll go straight over to members of the committee. Anyone wish to speak on this one? Councillor Trent?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sort of a bit disappointed that they came back with a proposal to fell additional trees in the original planning application, though I can understand, looking at the photograph, that one of them is definitely being damaged beyond rescue. You know, I kind of reluctantly have to go along with this, but I will say 90 years.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Any further comments from any members on this one? Councillor Lawton?
Excuse me, I support this application. Anything we can do to help education of our young children, I totally support, and I'm in agreement with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor McCormick?
So the 3 trees that are being removed. Sorry, I did read through this bit. I got a little bit confused because it started going off about other things that not to do with trees. So the 3 trees are being removed and then they're being replaced with 3 newer trees
in a different place.
Okay, are those trees going to be mature trees or?
Not sure. We have Fred Ingerfield on the line with us. Fred, would you like to speak on this? You're on mute, Fred.
Thank you, Chair. The replacement trees would be approximately, depending on what we can condition, potentially of a species that will grow larger and provide amenity to the area in the future, more so than the ones which we can't, which are not TPO'd and we couldn't TPO in the first place. So I think the replacement trees will provide a better amenity for the long term.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, can I just quickly recap? The tree information that was submitted suggested the new trees must be of a standard stock with a girth of 8 to 12 centimeters, height of between 2.5 3.5 meters, good quality, complying with national plan specification, and the suggested species are silver birch, field maple, and English oak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCormick.
And those trees, sorry, I'm not a tree expert, are they like fast growing? Because the bit I get worried about when people come and they say, oh, we want to chop down 3 trees and then we're going to replace them with 3 new trees, is the 3 new trees are very young and it's going to take years and years and years for them to grow into trees that are equivalent to what's being chopped down at the moment. So could we just be advised whether these trees are likely to grow into that in the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? Like how long would it take for them? Yeah, the ones that are there in the picture, how long would it take for them to grow into that?
You'd think between 5 and to reach a similar height. But yeah, they'd provide a far better long-term amenity than trying to retain these very foliated, unprotected trees that we see here.
Okay, yeah, I'm satisfied with that answer. Thank you.
Any Councillor Barron?
Thank you, Chairman. Can we just confirm, are the replacement trees 3 of the same species or 3 different species? I'm a bit confused on that. Thank you.
Well, we ultimately can make the decision, but they put forward a suggestion that the trees should be either silver birch, maple, or oak. So it's up to us to make that call, and I will be suggesting to make it at least 2 of the species to be larger growing, and 1 to be maybe some more subdominant in size.
Just thinking, I do appreciate what Councillor McCormack said, but I'm just thinking very long term, and the chances of them becoming a problem in the future. I'd probably recommend oak in there. I know they're not the quickest growing trees, but I think that compared to a birch in tree terms, they'll last a lot longer. So if we could add a condition that they're oaks, that would be fantastic.
Thank you. Fred, would you be happy with conditioning that they were oak trees?
Very much so, yep.
Fine, thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to say that I think Councillor Lawton was proposing a move, and I would second that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Monica.
I'm very sorry to come in. Can I just double check? In terms of the condition currently says there's 3 trees of a size and species to be agreed. Do I take it that the committee would like to amend the condition to say 3 oak trees?
Yes, if we could, Monica, that would be.
Thank you.
Be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bull.
Thank you, Chair. My point simply is that while we're asking them to replace 3 with 3, there's an ideal opportunity here to have more enhancement and have 4 for 3 or 5 for 3, because the loss that we all suffer while these trees are growing into maturity will be somewhat repaired by having more trees. Instead of 3 for 3, 5 for 3 would make much more sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Monica, do you have anything to say on that?
I would firstly like to refer back to Fred to confirm whether there is potential for planting additional trees. I'm always for planting more than what is proposed, so that would be no objection from me. However, I would like to also remind members that this is school with playing fields, and by planting additional trees, we might be impinging on the playing grounds and the space for the children in the future.
So members, I think we need to remember that when we gave this permission a while ago in the first place, we did insist then on having more trees planted than what were being removed. And again, I don't think I want to take away any more playing space, because the playing space for the kids is just as important as the trees that are in position for them as well. So personally, I'd be minded to stick with the 3 oak trees. I think they would probably produce the most benefit for the area and for that playing field area as well. But Fred, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Chairman. I think if you look at the 3 mature oak trees, and that's going to take, fast forward to 100 years. There's going to be plenty of canopy cover in that area. So I think in the mitigation for the loss of these 3, I think 3 oak trees is a far higher tipping of the balance, and is considered appropriate in this instance.
Thank you, Fred. Appreciate that. Okay, members. So I think we'll draw this one to a close. Now we have a move by Councillor Lawton, seconded by Councillor O'Neill, with the revised condition that the replanting is 3 oak trees. And I'll go to the vote on that one. And again, normal procedure, for or against, please. Councillor Barron. For. Councillor Borthwick. Councillor Bull. For. Councillor Davies. For. Councillor Hall. For. Councillor Hilliard. For. Councillor Lawton. For. Councillor Lepedevin. For. Councillor McCormick. For. Councillor O'Neill. For. Councillor Rice.
For.
Councillor Trent.
For.
Councillor Johnson. For. And myself also for. So again, that is unanimous, and that application is granted in line with the officer's recommendation and the additional wording to the condition. Thank you very much, Monica, and thank you, Fred, for your input. Thank you very much. So, members, moving on. Item 6C on the agenda this morning is Beach House Cafe, Mudderford. And I would ask for Frank, if you could present your case, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just confirm that you can see my presentation on the screen?
No. Yes.
You can. And can you see the mouse moving? Yep.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
You can. Yep. Okay. My presentation and case don't contain any trees, just to make that clear. So there is a tree consideration in this one. I've noticed that we've had a couple this morning. Chair and councillors, this is the Beach House Cafe. This is the first of 2 applications on the committee agenda this morning. This first one on Mudderford Sandbank is for the full demolition of what exists on site and the erection of a new build cafe restaurant. The application has been called in because the number of representations received exceeds the scheme of delegated powers. Forgive me if the slides don't appear straight as soon as they need to. I've got a problem with one of my fingers at the moment, so pressing keys is a bit awkward. The site location falls within designated greenbelt and flood risk zone 3, and either within or adjacent to sites of EU protected by a range of statutory EU, national and local designations. There are beach huts adjacent to the site, tourism pressure and access limitations. There are also other impacts to consider against relevant policies. Each element is addressed within the assessment report. The site has hosted a cafe or restaurant since the 1960s and is the only point of refreshment and food on the Sandbank Spit. Members will recall a history of aborted planning applications to update the facility, one of which proposed a 2-storey building, but all of which were withdrawn. A large part of the main building was lost to fire in 2018, but the outbuildings survived. The outbuildings that survived the fire and continued to comprise the shed to the east, which housed the shop before the fire, the wooden outbuilding to the east at the rear of the site, electrical substation, the gas tank enclosure to the northeast, the wooden gas bottle storage shed within the gas tank enclosure, and the gated service alley to the east, the rear of the site. The roofed seating areas at the front of the site, including the retractable roof, also survived and were restored. Modified shipping containers were placed on the site after the fire, regretfully without planning permission, and here numbered A, B, C and D. They're dealt with in the following application. Paragraphs 11 to 14 of the report give a contextual summary of the shipping container case, but we will come to that after this application has been dealt with. The site remains operative without any planning conditions having been established over history. It's become established lawfully over sufficient time to be exempt from enforcement action. Paragraphs 15 to 17 of the report discuss the lawful use of the site and what comprises the planning unit, including references to floor space and footprint considerations. So, the proposed development. Full planning permission is sought for the demolition of the existing open-air cafe and restaurant and the bar, comprising the seating area, the covered seating area, the ancillary outbuildings, the substation, the alley, and the erection of a replacement enclosed single-storey roofed building for use as a cafe, restaurant, bar with ancillary storage and replacement electrical substation within. There will be an opening roof element. As I start to talk about what is proposed, it's important to point out that permission was given in 2021 under Permission O for a replacement building, but also sought to retain and reuse the outbuildings in the open service alley. It didn't include or propose to rebuild those. The outline of what you see on the screen in blue is that scheme here. This is what was given permission a year ago in October 2021. The withdrawn two-storey proposal is also shown for comparison in red. That would have been a bit higher, and that garnered lots of objections, but was withdrawn and didn't conclude to a decision. The replacement building will be 1 storey high, with the proposed roof design seeking to replicate the existing beach huts, bringing several beach hut forms together to form one block, but in a slightly higher and wider format, befitting the identity of a commercial building. The forward part, nearest the harbour, would have a retractable roof, like the original and existing structures on site, with the central and rear portions featuring beach hut-like ridged roofs. Elevations facing south to the side and west to the harbour bay are attractive and feature glazing, with northern and western planar elevations emitting windows to avoid overlooking and privacy conflicts with the beach huts. The cladding materials will be non-combustible and pre-silvered in appearance, capable of withstanding prevailing winter weather and the aquatic environment. Internally, a large open plan floor area is proposed with posts and beams supports to the pitched roofs over, providing a flexible and naturally lit floor space. I'm just going to pause to cough, sorry. Seating with open roof is proposed in the same place as existing, to the west facing the harbour, with kitchen, storage and prep and a replacement substation to the east. An ancillary shop is once again proposed to replicate the functions historically associated with the premises and required by its licence to operate, sorry, its lease to operate. Green roof and solar panels are proposed, and sandgrass planting is outlined outside the site. A new bin store is proposed to the south, adjacent to the new council bin store behind the hut that is currently operating as the shop. The main reason for the high number of objections is the concern from beach hut users that their amenity will be negatively impacted and that the cafe restaurant is growing significantly in size. The report considers the wider range of issues pertinent in this case and demonstrates that in real terms, there is no increase in the operational footprint. It also explains that the site is immune from enforcement action with no conditions limiting the hours of operation. Licensing has previously permitted 8 AM till midnight, and the submission, as put on plan, sought to match those hours. The previous rebuild, granted in 2021, permitted from 10 AM until 11 PM and did not propose to enclose the service yard or plant within it. This proposal offers the chance to enclose that service alley and further restrict noise in a way the previous approval did not. Environmental health do not raise any objections, subject to conditions. Consideration of the impact of the adjacent natural habitats and the beach hut user amenity mean that conditions are again proposed to restrict opening to no later than 11 PM as per the previous approval, subject to an additional condition requiring the retractable roof to remain closed until 10 AM It is proposed to align the condition hours to those that exist and permit 8 a.m. opening, as breakfasts are already served on at the site. All the other aspects are considered acceptable and can be sufficiently mitigated for by way of condition. A summary of the scheme is given in paragraph 107 and planning balance in paragraphs 108 to 112. The development would accord with the NPPF and the development plan, would not materially harm the character or appearance of the Greenbelt, the SSSI, nature reserve or the nature conservation interests, and would be acceptable in terms of traffic safety, appearance, amenity impact and biodiversity enhancement. The proposal is recommended for approval in paragraph 113, subject to a number of conditions to address the complicated matters on this land split discussed in the report. That's the end of my presentation there, Chair. The site's very complicated in terms of its location, its policy designation for Greenbelt and so on, all of which it complies with. The issue is there's been a lot of public objection, which the report deals with. If members have any questions about specific elements or want to see slides again, I can bring those up again. Okay.
Thank you very much, Frank. Much appreciated. Jill.
Thank you. There is a written statement of objection from a Mr. John Dobson. Permission 7-2021-11229-0 for a smaller cafe was approved 5th of October 2021. Planning Officer Mr. Tebb stated in his report to this committee on the 28th of September 2021, in quotes, overall, therefore, in terms of both any impact upon visual amenities of this extremely sensitive and perhaps unique environment that is Mudderford Spit, the new building will have no greater or indeed adverse impact upon the wider SSI, Greenbelt or Nature Reserve designations, as discussed below, and would comply with policies CS1, CS6 and CS41 of the core strategy, the sequence strategy 2007 and paragraphs 11 and 124 of the NPPF. However, there would be no material increase in floor space footprint in this Greenbelt location, and thus it would not be materially larger or have any adverse impact upon openness of the Sandbank Spit or Christchurch Harbour. In this case, the area is covered by the Mudderford Sandbank Management Plan, April 2014 to March 2024, produced by the former East Dorset and Christchurch Joint Council, which sets out various objectives across the Mudderford Spit Sandbank. It is noted this document objectives includes the following key objectives: identify priority areas to defend and improve the quality of Mudderford Sandbank. B, to maintain the peaceful and tranquil character of Mudderford Sandbank. D, to provide and maintain basic modern amenities in an environmentally sensitive way that do not impinge upon the character of the sandbank. F, to balance the needs of various uses to ensure the site is sustainably managed and enjoyable for all. 30, the straightforward replacement of the Beach House Cafe, therefore, would entirely accord with these objectives, in particular replacing a former cafe which has been here since at least the 1960s, unquote. This application adds at least 57% to that of the pre-fire and approved cafe and has lately proposed drawing PL 01A 0710-2022 areas for waste storage out with the original site, adding a further 15% to the site area. The application presents flawed calculations. Comment 81, edition 27th of October 2022 refers. The present Planning Officer's report attempts to justify some but not all this increase in planning terms, but nevertheless, commercial activity increases significantly. Deliveries, commutes, maintenance and waste visits would increase along the 2 kilometre single access shared with pedestrians, cyclists and land train, 300 metres upon the shoreline. Comment 81, edition 09/11/2022 refers. Permission enhances the applicant's capability to increase turnover and pay an increased rent to BCP Council. Whilst this is not a consideration in planning terms, it does demonstrate that this is a larger commercial premises on the site. Enough is enough. This larger scale is too much for the fragile sandspit environment and access. A BCP-inspired enlarged coastal eatery is unnecessary and damaging here. A tranquil alternative to Bournemouth seafront would be eroded. There are two speakers in support of the application. First, Mr. Giles Moir of Chapman Lilly and Mr. Rich Slater on behalf of the applicant.
Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak and support the application. And as you heard, the applicants will also speak after me. As you'll have seen, the application seeks permission for a replacement cafe building in lieu of the building which was severely damaged by fire in 2018. The proposal will provide a permanent cafe building which will replace the existing storage containers currently used as open takeaway service. As set out in the officer's report, the proposed use, given the history of the site, is entirely compatible with neighbouring uses, the beach huts, and the wider character of this locality and the seaside setting of the area. The applicant has engaged with local stakeholders and interested parties when designing the cafe and has positively addressed the concerns associated with the scale and design of the previously withdrawn application, which also sought permission for a replacement cafe. On the slide which is on the monitor, that's shown in red. The site and its wider surroundings are within the greenbelt. The proposal, being a replacement cafe, will provide improved facility for both visitors and the occupants of the beach hut without conflicting with the purposes of the greenbelt. With regard to openness of the greenbelt, the scale and design proposal meets the requirements of Chapter 13 of the MPPF, as the proposal is comparable in scale and footprint coverage to the approved like-for-like replacement cafe. It's clear, as shown on the plans that you've seen, that the footprint of the proposed building will be no wider or deeper than the like-for-like extant permission. Importantly, the height of the building, being a series of ridges, would be similar to the ridge height of the extant permission, and the roof form has been designed in such a way that it looks like a series of beach hut roofs. In preparing the design proposal before you, the architect carried out a critique of the pre-fire building and the withdrawn planning application. This critique identified that both alternative proposals would not follow the rhythm of the adjacent beach huts. The current proposal provides a roof form, a series of link gables which replicates this rhythm and the arrangements of the adjacent beach huts. The proposal has been designed to ensure convenient access for all, with ramped access to the cafe being provided. The proposal will utilise a palette of materials which will be silvered and weathered in appearance, blending with the surrounding beach huts in this established coastal appearance. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Press that one. Lovely. Apologies, I'm just a simple restaurant manager, not used to talking in front of these committees, so I'll try and keep things succinct. Effectively, just to give a brief bit of history, there was an original design proposed a few years ago on behalf of BCP Council by an architect that they employed. This design did not fit with the area well, which we as tenants were not supportive of the design itself. And it unfortunately soured the reputation of the building and the potential project with the local residents. It was, as they said, withdrawn. However, the number of objections kind of showed that it was not an appropriate design for down there. Subsequently, the like-for-like replacement of the previous building has been approved. However, we see it as a lost opportunity, which is why we, as the tenants, have actually engaged another architect to try and draw up some plans that do fit the area, can make the potential of the horrific situation that was created by the fire and improve the offering for everybody down there. We engaged with the locals, the hutties as they're called, as well as the wider community. I personally trawled through all the objections received on the previous design to find out exactly what it was that people were objecting to. And we worked very closely with our architects to try and come up with a design that incorporated all of the objections as best we could. We engaged with the hutty community down there through the MSBHA and worked closely with them to incorporate as many of the suggestions as possible into the design. A lot of them were operational, which we did not feel that we could incorporate into the planning process, but that we have agreed a statement of operations with the MSBHA that we would be willing to work through and stick to, which I think resolved the rest of their objections. And as such, you will notice the Hutty Association has not objected to this design. We are a local family business. We are not a big developers. We are not into property development at all. To be honest with you, we like running restaurants. It's what we do. And we're very lucky to have been running this one down in that location for the best part of 2 decades now. We feel very much a part of the community down there. We have very good relationships with a large number of the huts down there, although we are aware that some of the ones that are closest to us are affected by there being a business there. There's no doubt that the business will continue to exist, whether it's in the like or the potential improvement. So really the new design is better for the surroundings. It enables us to bring the queues inside the building rather than having them queuing outside the building. It reduces noise on that front. It gives us the improved chance for insulating and soundproofing, as well as making it greener in general, improving the shop facilities, and allows us to relocate the plant and extraction to lesser impact on our neighbours. So we've basically balanced our offering to make sure that we can enable the best possible run for the business.
Thank you, Mr. Slater.
But whilst also looking after our neighbours at the same time.
That's fine. Thank you very much indeed. We also have Ward Councillor with us this morning, Councillor Eddie Coop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and can I thank the planning officer for his good report. Obviously, we've heard this is a contentious site and has been for since the fire 4 years ago. As I see it, this is the best design and in keeping with what has been proposed over the last couple of years. We cannot go back nearly 60 years ago when I remember it there as a little tin shack. We have to look forward, Mr. Chairman, for the future generations. And looking at this, I think this is the best we're going to get, and we need to go forward. And hopefully, if it is approved this morning, then things can be put in place, and hopefully a new building will be on that site in the next 2 to 3 years. So it's been 4 years in the making. I don't think we can go back anymore. We've got to look forward, and hopefully this committee and yourself, Mr. Chairman, would approve as recommended by the planning officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coop. Frank, is there anything that you've heard that you would like to come back on before I open up to members?
Just awareness that there's an additional couple of tweaks to some of the conditions in the addendum report presented yesterday. It's a long report and it's very complicated in terms of conditions. We want to get them right. So I spoke with the agent yesterday and we made sure that some of the dates and the numbers in those and the way the conditions will work are amended correctly. That's all I want to add at this point. If members need to see any of the screens during the discussion about footprint comparisons, I have all that prepared, so I can try and follow the discussion, all the questions with some screens and come back at that point if needed.
Thank you, Frank. Okay, over to members. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as my colleague has said, it's time now to move on. It's 4 years this is dragged on. We remember that the proposal which came before us before, we realised at the time that it was far excessive, that the height was ridiculous. And I think that this is, as Eddie rightly says, I think this is the best that we can get. I'm really pleased to see that I think the design that the architect has brought, bringing those roofs to look just like beach huts. And we always talk about street scenes and you know, this perhaps is the beach scene, but that sits, I think, in my opinion, that sits in very well with the surroundings. We've got to remember that down there it's very, very busy right from spring through to late autumn. The land train takes vast amounts of people down there, and people are looking for facilities to get food. And I think, you know, that this would be an excellent facility for that, and also the shop that people can visit and look around as well. So I'm really happy with it, and I think you know, that let's move it forward now and get the thing up and running. And I would be quite happy to propose that we accept the.
I'll nice to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor O'Neill.
I'll keep this short and sweet, Chairman. There's been a busy and successful cafe at this location for many, many years, and I think replacement is long overdue since the fire. The area is well used by visitors and residents alike, hence the success of the location. I find the proposal perfectly acceptable. It reflects the characterisation of the area, which I find pleasing, and will fully support the proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. As other members have said, I like the design in the context where it is. Just got a slight query. In the consultees, the list of consultees, I didn't see Dorset Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service, and I noticed the fire, and I saw the gas bottle storages there and cooking fat, and I just thought, has there been any discussions with the Fire and Rescue Service on this?
I think there are statutory.
Storage.
Frank, could you comment on that?
I can comment on that. Fire and Rescue used to historically back in the 90s be a statutory consultee. At the moment now, they often, when they are consulted, they come back with standard advice. They're still not, even despite the findings of Grenfell, the law hasn't fully kicked in yet where they become consultees on smaller schemes. They become consultees on schemes over a certain height, over a certain number of residential units. But the building control process, the relevant part of fire safety is what governs this. So planning wouldn't deal with the fire safety element. We looked at the escape safety of the building with regards to flood escape, and we consulted with building control on this one. The same thing applies with fire risk. They would deal with that at that point. We are satisfied from a flood risk point of view. There's adequate escape routes from the building. And they've told us that there's adequate fire escape routes from their point of view under the law. The fireproof cladding that's being proposed, I think that element's been specified that it is fireproof, just to make clear that although it looks like wood, you would have seen this type of cladding where it's wood effect. It looks like wood, but it's actually a fire resistant material. So that's the reason why we've touched on that. The fire service, I'm not sure if they were consulted on this. I haven't got the report open. I've got so many screens open with the presentation. I haven't got the report open, but typically when they do respond on cases, they tend to say this will come up. You know, we advise sprinklers be fitted. A lot of it isn't formal requirement yet. It tends to be where there's residential use that they comment on, and then they will pick it up down the line in building control.
Thank you, Frank.
But yeah, that's fine, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to hope that the application goes through. I will support the application, and I wish the applicant all the best of luck in the future should it get approved today. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Just to say, Chairman, that I think the design and scale is absolutely right for the site. I know the site very well. I'm very happy to support it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions on the hours, because the main body of the report said it would be 8 till midnight, but the actual condition 14 of hours says 8 till 2300 hours. So it's confirming that, but also if there's additional restrictions on, I was surprised there's music, because I've been there, not for a few years, but there was no music, and obviously things have changed. But again, there's talk about the retractable roof not being open until 10 a.m. in the morning, but there's no talk of it when it will be shut at night, again, to protect people staying overnight. So it's just clarity on the hours of, the main hours of that it is 0-100 to 2300, the timings of the retractable noise roof. I know there's meant to be a noise plan, but more detail on that. And there's not servicing as well. There wasn't much talk about that when the hours of bin collections and deliveries. And then, yeah, I'll leave it with that, but come back on another issue. Thank you.
May I respond, Chair? Is that okay? So waste management, I'll come back to right at the end in servicing and that. Just to respond to the councillor's question about hours, yes, I understand there's two things going on here. What's being applied for by the applicant was 8 AM till midnight, okay? What happens on site is unregulated and has no conditions. It's established over time, and they have been operating from 8 till midnight. That's what the license, the most recent license that's permitted, has allowed them to operate under the licensing regime. Under planning, there's no controls. We have to be reasonable in what we put on as conditions, and they have an established use that has no conditional control. We believe, having looked at this last time round, that 11 PM was a reasonable cut-off point, and that was with a building that had an open rear with an alleyway that wasn't sealed, wasn't closed. This time around, it's come back in with a more hermetic building at the back, let's say a sealed building, but we still feel that 11 PM is a reasonable time, because it's not just the impact on the people using the Beats huts, it's also the Mudford Sands management plan, which looks at trying to create a tranquil location after hours in the dark, and that's for the wildlife as well as just the character of the area. So as the hours of use, we are thinking, although they've applied for midnight, we are happy and talk with the applicant, 11 PM being the cut-off point there from a planning condition point of view. Earlier in the day, we previously were allowed from 10 AM on the last application that was approved last year. That hasn't been implemented, that hasn't commenced, that hasn't started in any way. So we're still back at the discussion point. It's been made clear to us this time that there is a breakfast trade that's operated from the facility, and that's happened for some time. But again, without the hours control, they start the kitchens up for 8 AM. So we've said, well, okay, 8 AM doesn't seem to be going into the 6 AM, the 5 AM early mornings if people are sleeping over in these huts. So 8 AM is currently what's perhaps happening. So let's condition that so we have a control on it, and we can then, if it happens earlier than that, we have a planning control on it. Member talked about the retractable roof. Now we've thought, well, early mornings, 8 AM till 10, let's have the roof closed. So if there's an additional increase in breakfast, then there's a control on that noise-wise. And the question was, well, why isn't the roof closing earlier? It's something we've considered, and I haven't put it on there as a condition, and perhaps it's right that it's discussed here at committee. There is scope to amend that condition to require on the opening hours that the retractable roof closes at 10:30, and then obviously the facility closes at 11. So it's that like a drinking up last orders type thing where the use begins to quieten down. That's an option, and if members want to discuss that, then we can amend the condition to say the retractable roof shall close at 10:30 PM. The parts of the week, the typical Monday through to Sunday through to Wednesday, and then the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe it's allowed to close at 11. There's some options there. The final point, if that answers the hours question, Chair, is the member happy with that?
Yes, thanks.
Was to do, is that okay? Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Servicing, waste management, bin collection. Some of this is covered by the lease that the operator has to operate by, in terms of there's recommendations in there that they should use the same service provider that the council uses. There's no obligation to, but there is a waste management condition proposed which will deal with how the bins are emptied and when they're emptied. And I think there's an informative that advises, we've certainly discussed it would be useful if the same bin lorry was a contract was arranged for the same collection time. Certainly the position of the bins behind the hut here, you can see where this couple are with the bird on top. Behind there where the council bins currently are, the proposal is to build a bin enclosure there so that both could be serviced at the same time from the same location. That will be governed by the waste management plans submitted in respect of that condition. There's a few things to get right when they look to discharge the conditions, and that's one of the things we'll look at. Servicing remains by the lease to happen from this side. There's the 2 parking spaces, and they were for vehicles that are parking associated with the operation of this facility. Obviously, the taking of items in can happen through the front door, but there is scope through a door here to allow service equipment to be loaded in or supplies, but that could take place from this side if that was reviewed. But operationally, this is historically where it's happened, in this area here to the north of the site. Does that answer the question in terms of the conditional controls on.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. The other question is probably more not directly for the application, but more on my general understanding. So obviously, there's mentioned in the report that the ferry finishes 5 or 6 at night, and there's talk about extending that hour. Similarly, the land train finishes similar time and extending that. So, and also in one of the objectors, they're talking about talk about a floating bar. So I'm just wondering, from a legal point of view, what processes would be consulted on to have a bar? What would be required for a boat to moor up and sail and maybe link in? But also, what consultations about extended hours of the ferry and the land train and the disruption to again hut owners, whatever? What the process of that, if it's relevant?
I think that certainly from the bar point of view, it's quite ironic that in licensing only last week we actually dealt with a floating bar for the River Stour. So anyone anticipating doing a boat would need to come to licensing for permission on that, and also get environmental health approval. So that's something out of the remit for this type, as you know, licensing planning totally separate. And I would think also on the land train and the barge, they're not really something that we as a committee can consider today, because they're not part of this application, and they would have to go through the normal formal consultations with everyone in that surrounding area on those if that was to happen. Thank you. Councillor Trent, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to propose that the roof be closed Sunday to Thursday at 10 p.m. I think that's a compromise that allows Friday and Saturday, but the other days 10 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. We'll bear that in mind when we come to the end.
Chair.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Just
Frank, I'll
like
come
to-
with you back in a second.
If I may, Chairman, I'd just like to comment on that proposal. I think 10 p.m. may be too early to close the roof. I would remind everybody that this is not a residential park. This is a prime holiday location. And I've been down there many evenings, late and early into the morning, for a number of reasons, often to find people sitting on their front verandas, drinking, eating and laughing into the early hours. I don't think we should overly restrict the success of this operation. And indeed, I'd put my money on many of the residents would use it late into the evening as well. So I just want to make a note of caution that we find a balance on how the operator is or is not restricted. Thank you.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Councillor O'Neill. Personally, I think 10 a.m. till 10:30 will be sufficient. And although, as I just 2 seconds ago stated, that licensing and planning have no similarities, in licensing we do tend to restrict outside uses and areas like that until 10:30 at night. So I think that would be fair and proper. And it does still, 10:30 at night is quite late enough. It starts to get chilly. You probably want a bit cover over your head from 10:30 onwards at night anyway. So I think the 10 o'clock till 10:30 that Frank earlier on suggested would be a very acceptable balance if we were going to go down that line. Sorry, Frank, I cut across you earlier. Did you want to come back?
Yeah, I think you've clarified it now, Chair. I was slightly confused. I think I heard the word till rather than from, the closure till, the roof till. So yeah, just to clarify, the roof to close 10:30 p.m. Between till 10 a.m. Yeah. And then that was on certain days, Sunday to Thursday.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I always class Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as school nights. So I think that would be ample. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights are the weekend relaxing nights. So I'll be happy with that.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So members, quite a good debate on this one. Is there anything? Yeah, did you accept the Councillor Davis? Yep. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I did indicate to speak. Sorry, I think I've been left off the list.
No, you're on my list and I just forgot to ask you.
Councillor Barron's point about the fire service being consulted has made me think about also the Coast Guard as well, and where they play into where we should be asking some of these statutory consultees, or just out of curiosity. We're a coastal council, and they might have some comments around that proposal, might make it difficult for us to extract a casualty from that location or something, and maybe that's something for the chair and vice chair to take away and look into whether we can when we can ask them in the future about these things. In my life, I've been very privileged to spend a lot of time in this location, both on the water and in these units, and this cafe is a central point within this community down there. I disagree that it's a holiday location. It is more of a residential location during the summer months. I know some residents down there will spend weeks on end down there. Possibly, it depends on your view on life, but I am very happy to see that this design has taken into account some of those former concerns. I've come down that harbour thousands of times in my lifetime, and I was really disappointed to see the previous application with some huge roof thing, and this is a brilliant design that takes into account the shape of the environment around it, and these brilliant indications of what it might look like, these cartoon type. It reminds me of the old Where's Wally books. But yeah, I completely support this application. Councillor Hilliard beat me to it over these opening hours, and I was a little bit concerned about that late closing time, because if they're closing at midnight, does that mean the staff are going to be leaving? It's going to be 11, so most of the staff will be gone, and it'll be done and dusted by midnight. So that sort of alleviates my concern there. But overall, I'm really pleased to see this come to us, and like others have said, I'd really like to see this situation dealt with after the terrible fire. So brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McCoy. Just before I move on to the vote, Frank, could you just come in and clarify with regards to Coast Guard, etc.?
Yeah, just a brief point. We don't consult the Coast Guard. They're the emergency service. We consult the Environment Agency and our own flood risk management teams. The Environment Agency are responsible for strategic flood risk prevention. They advise us that, having read the flood risk assessment submitted by the applicant, which includes plans for how they will prevent people being put at risk, so such as signing up for the early warning flood prevention system, raising sockets off the walls, having alternative means of escape from the building. Here, the risk isn't a sudden surge flood like the Canvey Island one in the 50s. This is to do with predictable high tides. So the building should be remaining in use and easily returnable to use. That's why all the electrics and servicing has to go up off the ground. What it's called is astronomical floods. It doesn't sound as crazy as it's to do with the moon. It's not like ridiculously crazy floods. The building is designed to absorb a hit from the high tide, basically. The mitigation within its structure and its utilities will allow it to come back into use fairly quickly if high tide does occur. The alternative means of escape, particularly as it's an open roof, if people were to be caught on site, they would have hours of warning. Typically, the premises don't open in bad weather. Part of the flood risk is a requirement for them to sign up to the government agency's early warning system. And one of our conditions talks about having a screen on display displaying weather, wind, tide forecasts, so the members of the public are aware of it too. There's no overnight lone working likely here, and informatives from the Environment Agency suggest that shouldn't happen. And there's no residential element within this facility, so there's no risk to life from when you're sleeping from a sudden flood. Other examples would be wind and so on, but the glazing has to comply with building regulations. So the matters are dealt with, and I've gone beyond this and consulted, because there's been reports in the past of restaurateurs being trapped further along the coast by flotsam being thrown at the building and fire services. Obviously, we don't want to put pressure on those people. I've consulted building control. They're happy. The Environment Agency are happy. We've done what we can to make sure those questions have been dealt with, and other agencies will be responsible for picking those bits up if necessary.
Thank you, Frank. Everybody happy? Yep. So we'll, Councillor Rice.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the appreciation of solar panels and the green roof. and whether, just to highlight whether any consideration has been given to compost toilets as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The toilets are actually already they're already there, so they're not part of this application as such. There is a toilet block to one side of this. Councillor Barrett? You got your camera on your... Okay. Okay, members, we'll move to the vote now, members, please. So we have a move to grant this from Councillor Davis, seconded by Councillor Hall. Just a quick couple of words. Frank, this has been an extremely difficult application for you to deal with. You've had so many different aspects of it, and thank you very much for getting a really good, although long, report done for us, but it's made it a lot easier for us here today to understand the pitfalls of what you've had to go through on this. So can I say thank you very much and well done to you on that. We'll move forward to the vote on this one now. Again, normal process, 4 if you are. Councillor Barron? 4. Councillor Borthwick? 4. Councillor Bull?
Against.
Councillor Hall? 4. Councillor Hilliard? 4. Councillor Lawton? 4. Councillor Lepedevin? 4. Councillor McCormick? 4. Councillor O'Neill? 4. Councillor Rice?
4.
Councillor Trent?
4.
Councillor Johnson?
4.
And Councillor Kelsey also 4.
So that's 13 votes in favour and 1 against. That move is carried.
So that application is therefore granted. Thank you to Councillor Coote for coming in and speaking, and for the manager and for the other reps, please. Thank you. Much appreciated. And thank you, Frank, for a great report again. Members, I'm going to adjourn for 10 minutes so you can have a quick comfort break, and then we'll come back and do the final 2. So back in session then, members. We'll move on now to item 6D, which is the Cafe at Mudderford. And again, I would ask Frank to present your case, please, Frank.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, can you all see the presentation on screen?
We can, thank you, Frank.
Thank you. So switching now to the second application. This application has been around slightly longer than the one you've dealt with before. This is for the retention of the shipping containers that were erected on site after the fire. The application is referenced N, and it was called in because, again, it wasn't called, it's before committee because the number of representations received exceeds the scheme of delegated powers. As you know, the site's hosted a cafe restaurant since the 60s. The history and context of the site has been explained in the previous presentation. I'll recap briefly that we know it's in Greenbelt. We know we've got the nature protection areas nearby, and we've got the huts, and the site serves tourists and locals who visit the sands for recreation. To give some context of the existing use, because this is the application that's had to look at it through enforcement, the application proposes, before us, proposes no change of use of the land. The findings of an earlier enforcement investigation in respect of what comprises the lawful use of the site and the extent of the site parameters are discussed in paragraph 16 to 23. The conclusions and investigations have been reviewed, and officers consider sufficient evidence exists to do two things. Firstly, to confirm the lawful use of the site remains as a cafe restaurant, and secondly, to clarify what comprises the planning unit, which includes the floor space and footprint considerations. So what's proposed? Well, it's retrospective. So in terms of proposal, it's what's already there. Paragraphs 1 to 8 set out what is proposed by the application and distinguishes between what is part of the application and what is not. Retrospective permission is sought for the temporary retention of the 4 shipping containers already situated within the established planning unit for use as kitchens, bar and storage prep for a period of at least 24 months. The containers were regretfully installed without the benefit of permission not long after the fire. The aerial photograph here shows the containers that I've labelled with the letters that match the plans to identify them. In this instance, it is the placement of the containers that requires planning permission, as they are considered, by way of their connections to local utilities, the ground, and the manner in which they are installed with large cranes, to comprise operational development, as set out in the Planning Act. 3 of the 4 shipping containers, which have been modified, are arranged with their long sides facing into the open-roofed courtyard, and they've been painted light blue and white. The containers house cooking and kitchen uses, containers B and C, a bar, container D, and the staff prep and hand wash facilities are in the half-size container A. Containers B, C and D have servery bar openings cut into the sides with shutters attached that run down. Container A, again, is half the size, uses the standard loading doors which face east into the rear service alleyway. Whilst the containers are visible from within the compound, only parts of them can be seen from outside the site. The bulk of their sides and elevations are generally hidden from view by the seating building, the outbuildings, and the enclosure or the beach huts themselves. The only exception to this is the half-size container A, which can be seen briefly as you pass along the frontage on the harbour side. It is set back over 10 metres from the frontage, and in this photo taken about a month and a half ago on a clear sunny day, I've had to adjust the contrast so you can actually see this is what it appeared like there, just to give a context so the container is set further back. The main building destroyed by fire in 2018 covered about half of the site, with a range of outbuildings, open-air storage and car parking taking up the rest of what comprises the site. The front open seating area with a retractable roof survived in part and was restored in situ. The outbuildings survived and continue to comprise those described in the previous presentation. They're shown on this screen. If you want me to go through them, I can. But I'm assuming we've dealt with that so quickly we're still remembering. The LPA agrees that the retrospective planning permission is not required for any of these structures as they already existed. Forms state the existing opening times of the premises range from 8 AM to midnight daily. Now, as discussed on the previous case, that's because those are the times that have been operated and there's no condition that restricts it to that. No previous conditions exist to control those hours, and the applicant does not seek, as part of this application, to alter the hours of opening. The report talks about conditions and what we can and can't do. We can't apply conditions to the whole site because the site isn't being proposed for a use. The containers are being proposed for continued use, and the conditions that are proposed talk about some controls of the cooking function to try and address the interim period until we get the new building up and running. Some objectors consider that container A oversteps the established operating area, but paragraph 41 of this report sets out why this isn't the case. The planning breaches that are pertinent to this case are discussed in paragraphs 37 to 43. Just to summarise, the unauthorised change of use of the office opposite the cafe site, which is currently where you can buy ice creams, into a temporary shop relates to a different planning unit or a different site and is not part of this proposal. The seating areas used by tourists and customers that sit outside the Red Edge site on the beach are not part of this planning application. The summary of the proposal is given in paragraph 120, and the planning balance follows that in 121 to 125. Temporary permission is considered appropriate in this case, and given the constraints and complexities of the site and likely to affect the discharge of conditions of whichever of the approved schemes are implemented, and that relates to the removal of the buildings, the issue to do with an invasive plant species on the site, factoring in a construction management plan for when you can and can't get equipment onto the site during winter. They will require some detail and attention to get that discharge of condition correct. Because of that, a temporary period of 3 rather than 2 years is considered reasonably necessary. Conditions are proposed to address the cooking smells into the later hours, as I suggested, having due regard for the fact that this application cannot legally apply condition controls to the whole use of the site, the wider site. So again, this proposal would accord with the NPPF. The development plan wouldn't harm the character of the greenbelt, the SSI, the nature reserve, or other designated conservation areas, so designated nature conservation aspects, would be acceptable in terms of traffic, safety, appearance, amenity, and biodiversity enhancement. It's recommended for approval in 126, subject to a number of technical conditions to address the matters discussed in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Frank. Jill?
Thank you. There is a short statement from Steve Barrett on behalf of Mudderford Sandbank Beach Hut Association. The Mudderford Sandbank Beach Hut Association do not object to the application. However, the resulting use of single-use containers for takeaway food and drink has increased commercial activity and littering of the sandbank, which is not in keeping with the Mudderford Sandbank Management Plan and proximity to an SSSI. This should not become a precedent for any future development in what is an environmentally sensitive location. We also maintain that benches placed on greenbelt land by the tenant outside of the temporary site, originally legally permitted under COVID regulations, should now be removed for the same reasons. And again, speaking in support, we have Giles Muir and Rich Slater, if you'd like to come forward.
Thank you, Chairman. This proposal, as you've heard, is the retention of 4 containers to allow the cafe use to continue and to operate following the main building being burnt down in 2018. The recommendation is for a 2-year temporary consent, which provides a suitable time frame for the application which you've just granted to be prepared and the conditions discharged. And this will allow for the continued operation of the cafe in the meantime. In terms of the officer's report, you've heard that the siting of the 4 storage containers would not have a greater impact on the opening of the greenbelt when compared with the extant permission, which is for the replacement 2018 consent. And in terms of the impact on the neighbouring SSSIs and SNCIs, you've also seen within your officer's report that the proposal is acceptable. Members, I ask you to support the application and recommend approval. Thank you.
Hello again, folks. Not a massive amount to add to this one, but just to sort of give a little extra background to it. This was obviously put up in response to the fire back in 2018. The fire happened in November, and we then had to wait for the council to demolish the site, which didn't happen until April, if I remember rightly, and we managed to get this open in May. Having never built a restaurant out of shipping containers before, it was certainly a challenge. We had to look at all the available options to make sure that we had a continuity of service down there. As has been pointed out, we are the only premises down amongst 400 beach huts. If we hadn't been able to carry on providing the service, they would have had nothing without a very long walk or ferry journey to get to the nearest shops. We managed to adapt operationally for the open air factors. You know, we haven't been open past 8 o'clock more than a handful of times, despite the fact that the licence allows us to, because we've worked with our neighbours to make sure that there's been as little disruption to them as possible. And to be honest, the response since we've opened in this format has been so great. People have actually asked for this to be left as a permanent, and why do we need a new building? We've kind of come back on those and tried to adapt some elements into the previous design that you saw going through. It's changed the way we look at the restaurants and the way we hope to keep it going forward as a much more casual operation. And just in response to the comment from Steve Barrett, re the benches on the front, little ironic given how many of his members of the hut owners have benches well outside their own beach huts without permission. As the council have made clear a few times, they should probably think twice before objecting on that basis. And BCP have allowed these benches to be sited out there as they have for many seafront sites in recent years, and the number of benches we have are far fewer because we don't want to overpopulate the area and we don't want to cause overspill. We just want to give people somewhere to sit down.
Thank you very much. So Councillor Coop has left us, but he did ask me just to mention that he would support this, and obviously as we had granted the previous application, he would ask that we supported this so they could continue trading whilst building the new premises and to carry on. Over to members. Councillor O'Neill, followed by Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chairman. There's no question that since the fire, which many of us would remember, operation has been difficult, if not challenging. And I think this is one of the situations where we need to be pragmatic in our decision to support the operation moving into the future. And therefore, I'm certainly happy to move to that effect. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Lawton, second. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would have proposed and seconded as well. But it's essential, isn't it? It's logic as well. We've got to do it because otherwise it would close down. So I don't see any problem at all with it, and I'm happy that it's been proposed and seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. Just about condition 6, about removal, demolition. The hours, I would suggest tie in with the hours on the previous recommendation, condition 9, to say Monday to Friday 8 till 6, Saturdays 8 till 1, and not on Sundays or public holidays. So condition 6 at the moment is very loose. Thank you.
Frank, would you like to come back?
Yes, Chair, I will. There's a specific reason for that conditions wording, and it's to do with the awkward nature where the site is. We don't want to be in a situation where our hands are tied to push towards enforcement on something that's unreasonable. To get plant and equipment in to this site is going to require logistical control controlled by the Construction Environment Management Plan, which also is going to require a phased document how they're going to remove the structure so it works. It doesn't cause highway problems for the people that use the beach huts. Has consideration for the ecological side of things. There isn't spillage and so on. The hours of construction hours of demolition for this specifically are to enable for the heavy crane plant to stay on site over the weekend rather than have to get it off site. And also if there are winds, tides and things that cause problems and need to get things done sooner rather than later, predicted high tides, to factor that in so that if it requires a Saturday and a Sunday and 2 weekends in a row to prevent the equipment from staying there for another 2 weeks, it's to enable that to happen. It's not intended to allow that operation to continue for, uncontrolled for months. It's to allow some mitigation, which will be dealt with by the construction demolition management plan in tandem. But the condition allows for that slightly longer working hours, so that you can get rid of the materials and the debris in a shorter window to enable the construction of the new building. So it's specifically to do with removal of this kit, the surplus amount of information of documented construction material on site in a shorter window. That's why. If that's not clear enough, I can try and explain it better. But
No, that's clear. Thank you.
there is some justification behind, some reasoning behind it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Frank. I think we all understand on that one. Councillor Hall.
It's common sense.
Sorry, Councillor Hall.
It's common sense, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Pedman. Sorry.
I just want to point out that we've got 2 compliance conditions, number 6. Oh, and I read this wrong one because it's odour from hot food cooking. I thought that doesn't tie with the question being asked.
Okay.
We've got 2 consecutive number 6s, so can they be renumbered?
We'll get that amended. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's one of those situations where you can't make an omelette without breaking an egg.
No.
And logistically to move those around in that situation is going to be quite difficult enough. So I think we, as a committee, we should try to help the applicant there. A personal preference, I don't like the colour of them. I don't like the cobalt blue in that situation where everyone, all the huts that are around in those photos seem to be really quite pastel. But that's just a personal preference, and I think they must get really hot in hot weather as well. But so I will support.
Thank you. Councillor McCoy.
Thanks, Chair. As a construction professional myself, I would not want to be taking on the job of getting these out and in and out. And I was just wondering if we could actually add into one of these or all of these conditions that if the applicant had a very good reason to break the condition, and the crane is a classic one that sometimes things on site don't quite go, and the constraints on this site. I mean, it's at the end of like a triple SI between 2 bodies of water. If they can't get the crane out and they need just a couple more hours, just for a senior planning officer to just say, yeah, that's fine. Don't take the crane away and then bring it back all the way back up the river, or some sort of flexibility within the conditions where a senior planning officer or planning officer can say, actually, yeah, you could have 6 more hours down there with the crane or whatever. Because I just don't see the point in them being so tight that there's no flexibility in it. So if we can amend it so that there could be some flexibility somewhere.
I'll ask Frank to come back on that one, Simon, because it's a really good point. I don't want to be standing in their way. We don't know what the weather's like. These cranes can't operate in certain winds and things like that. So I think we do have to be really pragmatic and let them do it. Frank, can you come in on that one?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for the condition number 6 thing. I thought I'd got everything in this report, but there you go. There was something I missed. Failed. Condition 6, the one to do with construction hours, is slightly amended by the addendum report. Just to be aware of that, we've clarified the condition at the moment, as proposed in the report, makes them do the works at the end of the period rather than if they want to start earlier. So we've proposed taking the year out and allowing a window in the winter where in either year that they could do that. In terms of how we deal with minor overages or changes, well, the enforcement team are very practical and will look at, is the breach intentional? Are people really, rinsing out the council, trying to take the mickey? I think in a situation like this, it will be fairly obvious that everyone's interest to get it done in the most expedient time. And if it means there's an overage, that will be looked at that point in time. The aim of the demolition management plan on this scheme, as is the aim of the construction management plan on the one we've just approved, is there's a factor in that requires consultation with the local residents, local neighbours, whatever you want to call the users of the beach huts, to make them aware of what the plan is and how you're going to engage them. So how you're going to be contactable with a 24-hour number or an email address, how you're going to relay information across to those people that a big crane is coming in and how long it's going to be there and what does it mean for you. That's all part of the demolition construction management plan that has to be approved. So the mitigation of what you'll do in a situation where there's going to be overage. How will you put that message out? Will it be a notice? Will it be a WhatsApp group you can join? Will there be someone walking around telling you? You know, that will be covered by that technical side. The practical side of how we deal with it, well, as a pragmatic approach to making sure that the proper development happens, I don't think we would want to add to costs, given what construction costs are, to make people leave and come back to the site with that. There will be a comfort letter sent, but I would hope that will be done with involving the local neighbours group to show that they have at least been made aware of it. And there's attempts to, you know, what will we do in the meantime if someone needs to bring a car in to empty their hut out? How will we accommodate that request? As long as that's dealt with, I can't see there being a problem with a few days here and there or a few hours here and there. But we will have to assess that as it comes up. Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy with that attitude, Frank. That's really good. I think Mr. Slater's in the room with us today, and I think he's heard what people have said, and I think it will be, the onus is on him to make sure that the hutties are not inconvenienced as any more than absolutely necessary. And I'm sure, again, they will want the development done in a quick and prompt time to make sure they can get back to a normal standard of life out there. With regards to the statement from Mr. Barrett, it was mentioned about litter. And again, I would ask Mr. Slater if he can ensure that there are enough bins, whether that is talking to us as a council to provide more litter bins in that area for them, or whether that's something he can get his staff to keep an eye on in the future. But just as a way of keeping the residents happy and, you know, making it a conducive application for everyone, I think it's a good idea to do that sort of thing. But we have a move on the table to grant this application. And again, I'll go around the room in names and call for yes or no. So, Councillor Barron. For. Councillor Borthwick has left the room. Councillor Bull. For. Councillor Davies. For. Councillor Hall. For. Councillor Hilliard. For. Councillor Lawson. For. Councillor Lepedevin.
For.
Councillor McCormick. For. Councillor O'Neill. For. Councillor Rice.
For.
Councillor Trent. For. Councillor Johnson. For. And Councillor Kelsey also for. So that makes that unanimous. Again, thank you very much. And thank you again, Frank, for making it a very easy application for us to understand and study and go through with you. So well done on that one. And thank you to everyone that's taken part. Moving on, members, we will go to the final application today, which is item 6E, which is Branksome Chine Cafe, Pinecliff Road in Poole. Ask Sophie Birch if she could present her case, please.
Can you see my screen?
We can indeed. Thank you, Sophie.
Yeah. So just to let you know, I've also a bit of a cough, so apologies in advance.
I think we need to do something about this planning. You all seem to be ill.
So the application in front of you today is at Branksome Chine Cafe and Poole, and it seeks full planning permission for internal and external alterations and extensions to the existing cafe restaurant premises. So the broad location, Lakeside Road and Westminster Road, are to the north off the map. The site's accessed off Pinecliff Road. There's some residential development up the hill, and the promenade and beach are to the south. The site is located within Branksome Park and Chine Gardens Conservation Area, and the building itself is locally listed. So some site photos. So this is the application site from the front elevation and from the rear side elevation. So as you can see, there's already a flat roof rear extension, which was approved some number of years ago. So again, here's the rear side elevation, and you can see access off the promenade, then again, part of the car park. So here's another image of the site, and you can just catch a glimpse of some residential properties to the rear on higher land. And again, here's just a better photo of these residential properties. Here's the proposed site plan. So access and parking arrangements remain unchanged, and the vast majority of the works are contained within the current built area. Here's the proposed ground floor plan. So 2 extensions are proposed at the rear of the building on each side, and these will utilise what is an existing decking terrace area. And new steps are also proposed on the rear to maintain access to the promenade. So here's the proposed first floor plan. A covered roof pergola and terrace area are proposed to the rear, and outdoor dining areas are proposed to the front at each side, just here and here, and they're under parasols. So overall, the existing venue has a floor area of approximately 920 metres, and the extensions seek to increase it by approximately 198 square metres. So here are the existing elevations. You can just see the existing rear extension just here. And then here are the proposed elevations. So as you can see from the front elevation, the overall appearance is largely unchanged. You can just about see the parcels. So I'll just show you the existing one again. And then here's the proposed. So this elevation, viewed from within the conservation area, or was largely unchanged, sorry. So this elevation, viewed from within the conservation area when travelling down the hill, is arguably the most important. And given the minor changes to this aspect, the scheme is considered to preserve the character from this vantage point. I would also add that although the scheme seeks to repaint the render on this elevation, this could be done without permission. The changes are most evident from the rear elevation and also the side elevation. The materials proposed are somewhat more contemporary, with timber and a large amount of glazing on the rear elevation. The Conservation Officer has objected to the scheme, stating that the proposals are as unsympathetic design, which is out of scale in comparison to the existing rear extension. They also state that the timber cladding is considered unsympathetic and incompatible with the historic building, and as such, it is their opinion that the scheme is not in accordance with PP 30 of the Poole Local Plan. From a development management point of view, in terms of impact on the conservation area, it is considered that over recent years, this is evolving with numerous contemporary schemes approved and constructed in the area. So on a previous slide, you could just see the modern apartments to the rear. Yeah, so just up here. In terms of impact on the locally listed building, it is recognised that the scheme will result in some harm by way of introduction of contemporary additions and concealment of some features. However, the harm identified is at the lower end of the scale, and on this occasion, we do consider this minimal harm to be outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme, which include ensuring the enhanced ability to utilise the building to support the BCP area's tourism offer, ensuring the non-designated heritage asset remains in use. It will also promote economic development throughout construction and through the increased operation at the venue. There are numerous objections, around 230, and I will address the most common issues. However, these are all outlined and expanded upon in the report. With regards to neighbouring amenity, given the nature of the works and existing separation distances, they are unlikely to result in any overshadowing, overlooking, or appear oppressive to neighbouring properties. Numerous comments regarding noise have been raised. However, the Environmental Health Officer has reviewed all the information submitted that suitable controls exist within the licensing regime that the facility is legally bound to engage in and comply with. And as such, they have no objection regarding noise or any other environmental matter. Nevertheless, we have attached a condition to ensure closure at 11 p.m. given the increase in floor space to ensure neighbouring amenity is protected. 11 p.m. is generally recognised as the start of night time, and other similar venues in the area, such as the Cliff, also close at this time. As such, it is considered reasonable to condition this. This is reduced from the midnight closing time that the applicant has requested to stay open until, and earlier than what the existing venue can lawfully stay open until through licensing. I would add, at present, there are no planning conditions to control opening hours at the existing venue. I would also like to add that numerous objections make reference to other venues owned by the applicant and site noise associated with these venues. However, this proposal does not relate to any other premises, and the owner or operator of the site has no bearing on planning assessment. Numerous objections also discuss alcohol and antisocial behaviour, and while these concerns are acknowledged, there are other control regimes such as licensing and policing which exist to control these matters. I would emphasise it is not for the local planning authority to prejudge how a venue may be run, and we must assume that it will be operated in accordance with applicable laws. So with regards to the impact on parking and highway safety, the highways team have been consulted and have no objection, subject to a number of conditions which are outlined in the report, and there are conditions 4, 5 and 6. So to conclude, although the scheme will result in some harm to a non-designated heritage asset, this is considered to be at the lower end of the scale of harm. It is not considered that the scheme would result in harm to the conservation area other than that identified to the locally listed building. The scheme will ensure the continued use of a non-designated heritage asset whilst promoting economic development through the construction of the scheme and the increased operation at the venue. The scheme will not result in a material planning harm on neighbouring amenity, with the current use of the building remaining unchanged. The scheme is unlikely to result in any increased highway danger or congestion so as to warrant a refusal of the scheme, and the scheme will not result in any harm to protected species. It's therefore concluded that the scheme would achieve the objectives of sustainable development in line with adopted policy, and as such, this application is recommended for approval. I also just want to make you aware that there have been some late items. A proposed elevation with the correct label has been uploaded. One letter of support has been removed. There's one new letter of support and 3 new letters objecting. These comment on the following. One objection makes comments on the highway officer's response. Another objection makes reference to part of the car park, which has recently been fenced off to start development. I would add that I have reported this to enforcement, who have opened a case. One of the letters of support suggests that the area needs brought into the 21st century, and the scaremongering surrounding this application is ill-informed. And finally, an objection makes reference to disparaging remarks about the regional origin of clientele. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie.
So we have Mary Davidson, who is speaking in objection on behalf of Chatsworth residents. Mary is joining us on Teams.
I am. There we go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Thank you, Mary. Yeah.
Jolly good. Right. I'll just put my time switch on. Lovely. My apologies, Chair, that I'm not there in person. I heard your note before. I live in the frozen north and it still is very frozen up here. I am the planning consultant who is representing the residents in Lakeside Road and Westminster Road. We followed this application from the outset, even though no neighbour notification took place. Throughout, we've wanted to understand exactly what was being proposed and what measures were going to be put in place to ensure effective controls existed. We believe that the application is fundamentally flawed in the way it has been presented. It does not convey the full extent of the increase in activity proposed. A key point you'll have seen repeated in the officer's report is that this is an existing use and therefore any changes in the level of activity is irrelevant. This is simply not correct. The planning officer fails to identify and explain that an intensification of the use, which would be contrary to Local Plan Policy 27, needs to be properly considered. If intensification of a use leads to a change in the character of the development, such as here, then it is relevant and it is supported in case law. So let's look at what is proposed. There are approved planning drawings which show the internal layout of the building and the number of covers existing at approximately 200. The applicant proposes 395, therefore double the intensity. This excludes the bar area too. This, of course, does not include the additional 220 covers on the deck area or the takeaway facility proposed. To therefore say that there is no intensification of use is not correct. This is going from a summer beach cafe closing at 6 p.m. to a year-round activity better suited to a busy commercial area. So what are our concerns? Firstly, traffic and parking. It should be noted that Highways initially objected for the following reason. The proposals failed to demonstrate that the restaurant capacity increases could operate without contributing to parking stress in the vicinity of the site, which would result in harm and adverse impact on highway safety. This clear instruction was overturned. Car parking standards are based on the increase in floor space and not head count, and therefore only 8 extra spaces are required, notwithstanding the extra covers or the 120 employees. This is clearly wrong, given that Branksome is in a parking zone D, one of the least accessible locations in the borough for public transport. It is therefore incredulous that a travel plan was not submitted nor conditioned for future consideration. Our second concern is noise, particularly from the venue itself. My client instructed their own noise consultant, Sharps Redmore, to provide advice on how to present this to the council. They disagreed that the controls within the premises licence would be sufficient on their own to control the noise from the venue. This is especially so in relation to the first floor extension, which shows 160 covers under a retractable roof with bifold doors onto the terrace. It should be noted that this area is not considered as new floor space. We think it should have been. The consultant advised that the noise breakout from this area could be significant, especially if the applicant is to operate this venue as they do in Hove. Our advice to the planning officer in April set this out and suggested that design changes should be made to the plans to include noise mitigation on both the first and ground floors. None of this advice was followed up. So the officer claims that there are other control regimes in place, then planning control can take a back seat. But this just beggars belief, because if this development is not properly conditioned through the planning system, then what is the point of having a planning policy such as PP27 to ensure that, and I quote, development ... would not result in a harmful impact on amenity for local residents? These are the three areas where planning controls must be applied. The ongoing management. Key issues such as controls on parking, delivery and refuse collection are to be discharged by condition. This is clearly wrong and is information that should have been submitted up front by the applicant. Any positive decision should be delayed today until that management strategy is in place. There should also be scope to review the position post-opening to allow appropriate mitigation measures to be introduced. If necessary, an independent review done every 3 months or so for a period of 2 years. Secondly, the hours of operation. We are pleased the officers recommended the 11 p.m. cut-off, but 10 p.m. would be preferable in this quieter residential area. And certainly, having heard the discussion already on the Mumford Sandbank Cafe, I note that 10:30 was agreed for the closing of the retractable roof on this occasion. We also think there should be a condition limiting the number of customers in the restaurant and bar area. To conclude, perhaps if the applicant had not been so dismissive of working with the residents and having a constructive dialogue, then an effective management strategy could have been achieved. As it stands, the residents are deeply unhappy about this proposal, and the lack of support from officers to help deliver an effective system of control, as we've seen, for instance, at Mumford, is sad. We therefore hope this committee will be able to execute their authority and either refuse planning permission on the lack of clarity or defer a decision until a management strategy can be consulted upon. Whatever is decided, better controls on the future operation of this venue must be put in place. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
And speaking in support, we have Chris Mill of Pure Town Planning, followed by Graham Hollinshead of Rockwater.
Hello members, my name is Chris Mill. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and an Associate Director of Pure Town Planning. The Planning Officer has comprehensively explained the full details of the scheme in her opening presentation to you and Officer Report. And throughout this process, we have worked closely with her and we wish to thank her for her time and efforts in this regard. I wish to now briefly outline the main considerations why we feel permission should be granted today in line with the Officer recommendation. Firstly, principle and impact on character. The proposal seeks to refurbish an existing tired cafe restaurant. No change of use is proposed. Therefore, the principle of Rockwater running a cafe in this location cannot be objected to on planning grounds. As your officer has noted, the Conservation Officer is not supportive of the scheme, and a number of local residents have also raised concerns in the respect of the impact on the conservation area and locally listed building. A member of the public chose to make an application earlier this year for national listing of the building. However, this was rejected by Historic England because it didn't meet the statutory listing criteria. Your planning officer has carried out a comprehensive assessment weighing up impacts on the heritage assets against the public benefits of this scheme and concluded that whilst some harm to the heritage assets has been identified, this harm is on the lowest end of the scale and it's outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme due to the modernisation of the building along with the enhanced facility to the benefit of the area's tourism offer, which has the full support of the council's tourism officer. In particular, the planning officer notes that whilst the proposal will add more contemporary elements, the conservation area management plan makes it clear that there's no in principle objection to contemporary building styles within the conservation area. Crucially, the changes to the front elevation viewed from the conservation area when travelling down the hill would be very minor and are considered to blend in sympathetically with the existing character of the building and not cause harm. As was the case when previous extensions to the building were approved by Poole Council, your officers deemed that the more contemporary design approach along the coastal elevation with a sensitive natural tone material palette is appropriate for this seaside location. Moving on to neighbouring amenity, despite the environmental health team raising no concerns relating to noise pollution from the outset, given the number of objections from local residents raising noise as a concern, we provided a comprehensive noise impact assessment which shows that the levels of noise generated from the cafe/restaurant would be indistinguishable from the existing use and would not cause any adverse harm to neighbouring amenity. The Environmental Health Officer has reviewed all the information, including the noise impact assessment submitted by local residents.
Simon. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Please carry on.
Okay, so sorry, the Environmental Health Officer has reviewed all the information and confirmed that there is a licence in place containing controls in respect of noise, and thus there is no objection to the application on noise grounds or any other environmental matters. In terms of highways and parking, following an initial reservations raised by the highway officer, further details were submitted to address their concerns. In particular, it was clarified that much of the extended areas essentially already had existing seating there. It was just external rather than internal, and thus the proposal wouldn't necessarily lead to substantially more restaurant covers. Following reconsultation, your highway officer has no objection to the scheme, as confirmed in your officer's report. The applicants are happy to provide additional cycle parking and a parking management strategy. So, councillors, this scheme would ensure the continued use of a non-designated heritage asset whilst promoting economic development in the form of delivering increased employment opportunities and improving the tourist offer without harmful impacts on the character and appearance of the conservation area, neighbouring amenity or highway safety. I hope you all agree with Sophie's recommendation to grant permission and vote in favour of approving this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Apologies for the interruption.
Good afternoon, councillors. Good afternoon, Chair. Firstly, thank you for giving us a few minutes to address you. I've noted the objections and fully understand that some folk don't like it and don't like change and don't want change. I was lucky enough to have a director's role at Wagamama for 5 years. I looked after the south of the UK and London, so was a regular visitor to Bournemouth, always made sure it was on a sunny Friday afternoon. So I know the area well. And I was lucky enough to spend some time in Japan, and the Japanese have a business philosophy regarding continuous improvement. It's called Kaizen, which translates to good change. I'm sure back in 1932, when the building was built and there was a huge conservatory put on the back for visitors to enjoy the first indoor solarium, and that was actually approved and built by this council. Actually, we're not proposing a massive change here at all. We will continue to provide a restaurant and a cafe venue. And as such, it's important that the members understand that a Rockwater branded facility could open tomorrow with the existing permissions and no need for this grant. But, and it's a big but, the building is extremely tired. The number of covers, and just to correct Mary, the number of working covers at the moment is 132. So it's not an intensification, but covers need to be added to make it a viable and justable offering and to make most of the spectacular location. We took on a declining business that had a really poor offering. We're looking to invest circa £12 million across Branksome and Sandbanks to bring these buildings and in turn the tourism offer, the hospitality provision back to life and to deliver a quality venue benefiting of this location. I've heard the objections made today. We face similar comments and noise at Hove around parking, footfall, noise, and just the general lack of understanding of what Rockwater is about. A couple of years on.
I'm sorry, but you're actually a minute over your allowed time between the two of you, so I'm going to have to bring you to a halt to be fair to the objectors as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, we have Councillor Mayhanes.
Yep. So, Chairman, I have a written statement to read out on behalf of Councillor Mayhanes. Chairman, members of the Planning Committee, my apologies for not being able to attend in person. As you would have heard, this application attracted significant concerns from not just neighbouring residents, but residents from other areas in Poole. A total of 231 representations were received, of which 226 were objections, with 5 in support. Paragraph 30 lists the points of concerns raised, of which there are many. Some of these are reflected in the key issues that need to be considered and assessed to make the planning judgment, which lies with yourselves as the planning committee. The case officer has been thorough in her assessment and taken many of the points raised, how they have been considered, along with reasons for her judgment on these matters. However, I do not agree with the judgment on the impact to the local heritage asset. The building that we know as Branksome Chine Restaurant was formerly a bathing station and is a designated heritage asset as set out in paragraph 52, whereby it is considered to have architectural interest, of good quality design and reflects period detailing. The proposed changes to the front elevation are considered to be minor by the case officer. This view is not shared by our conservation team, who have concluded that the application is not in compliance with PP30, as the proposal neither preserves or enhances the historic and architectural significance of the heritage assets. It would result in diminishing the significance of both the Branksome Chine Restaurant and the nearby shop and lifeguard station building. This is about the balance to modernise while retaining the architectural merits, and I agree with the conservation team that this will erode the very features that make this worthy of its heritage asset classification. Residents have raised concerns about other matters that fall outside of the planning framework. Antisocial behaviour and noise issues from music and or entertainment, as the louvre roof will mean the potential for the sound to travel to the surrounding dwellings. This falls within licensing as well as environmental health, and I would be grateful if the committee impresses upon these service areas to monitor these activities should permission be granted. Residents remain concerned about parking arrangements. We have seen record number of visitors to our award-winning beaches. With that comes the inevitable traffic congestions, with visitors searching for parking, as the Branksome Chine car park, which has 104 spaces, is full. It is interesting to note that paragraph 92, Highways have stated that with this capacity, 8 more additional spaces are required to meet our parking SPD. This does not resonate with the parking concerns raised by the residents. Beach Road car park is cited as an alternative to mitigate the parking capacity issues. Please note that this alternative is deemed to be underused. As such, it is earmarked for disposal at a future date to be determined, despite my call for this to be reassessed. Therefore, should Beach Road car park be disposed, the alternative provision will no longer be available, making this mitigation arrangement unsustainable. I ask that due consideration is given to the parking arrangements. With the current capacity of the surface car park, it is assessed that there needs to be a further 8 spaces. As it is a public car park, it is not for the exclusive use of the restaurant. While there has been a request for a parking and service management strategy, none has been provided with this report. Chairman, I urge that the committee also consider carefully the implications this will have to a heritage asset. While the asset is not lost, the features that are of merit are being eroded away. MPPF 202 states, where a development will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a heritage asset, this harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. Our conservation team, who are the experts, consider that the harm is significant. As such, the balanced judgment required by MPPF 203 must be that the harm is significant enough to warrant a refusal.
Thank you very much, Jill. So, over to members. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose the first observation I'd make is that this is a prime beachfront location and one of the more popular beaches along the coastal strip. And it's certainly an area that I often use. I think the development is also importantly supportive of tourism and therefore employment in the area. And it brings to the seafront a much improved facility, which is long overdue. And in fact, the proposed design, I think, will make a much better utilisation of the space and the guest experience. I'd also observed that many of the surrounding buildings are contemporary in their design. And indeed, along the stretch of road, the avenue, we have approved contemporary designs. And I think this building seeks to attempt to get a balance between the contemporary and the traditional, which I think is achieved when you look at the various facial aspects. There's been mention of parking. It is a prime residential but tourist location, and therefore parking can be a challenge on occasions. It's not a permanent problem. And apart from permitted street parking, there is parking at Branksome Chine itself by this proposed development. There's the Beach Road car park just up the hill, which has often got spaces, even in the summer. It's one I tend to use. There's also a car park behind Camphor Cliffs Library, which is a short walk down a sloping pathway to this facility. I actually think that this proposal is right on many fronts for those very reasons. And I think it will enhance the tourist and residents' experience and the many residents and dog walkers that use that area. I'd also add that there's been several occasions when I and others have attempted to go to the facility to either to get coffee or for a lunch, only to find that there's a lack of covers and people have to walk away. So I think this development is absolutely sound, absolutely solid, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nim. Sophie, my apologies to you. I would normally come back to you after the objectors, etc., and ask you for your comments, and I failed to do so. So apologies for that. Would you like to come in now?
Yeah, I'll just come back on a few things that Mary brought up. Firstly, it is outlined in the report that the neighbour notification was undertaken in accordance with the statement of community involvement. She also mentioned the change in the character. It's outlined that the use classes order does not, however, address the intensity of use, nor distinguish what might comprise a busy or quiet restaurant. Again, this is outlined in the report. There's also a lot of talk on covers and increasing capacity, but at present, there is no condition to control the amount of people that can be inside the venue. So they could increase the amount of people at the minute. And then finally, the travel plan. I would add that these are for the mass movement of people, so very large scale residential schemes, not, they wouldn't be expected for an extension. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Councillor Rice.
Yeah, can we get more clarification on the covers? So it didn't seem to be an issue about having more people within the building. So you've just stated that there isn't a condition to control the number of people there at the moment. But with the increased amount of space, the likelihood that there are going to be more covers and the fact that the retractable roof then leads to more noise that hasn't been answered so far. Thank you.
Yeah, well, of course.
Yeah,
sorry. Yeah, so of course the increase in floor space venue could fit more people in it. But as I outlined during the presentation, we have introduced a condition to close at 11 p.m. and this is earlier than what the existing venue can lawfully open until. Yeah.
And so just coming back on that, if that's okay. So can we just get clarification then? Because the report seems to suggest that there isn't going to be any difference in noise, but if we're agreeing that the floor space is going to be increased, chances are there's going to be more space for more people. And with the retractable roof, there seem to have been some, or I haven't understood fully about the noise that can be created from this extra floor space with this retractable roof, and whether that needs to be assessed or not.
Environmental Health have assessed the application and have no objection, nor have they suggested any conditions.
Am I correct in understanding that they've said that there wasn't any increase in covers though, so therefore they have then said that therefore there's not an issue with noise?
I don't have their response to hand, so I need to come back to you on that one.
Sophie, we do have an environmental health officer on the meeting. If I can call them in, that would be really helpful. Morning, Andrew.
Hi, good morning. So first of all, unfortunately, I wasn't the officer who dealt with this, who dealt with this application. The officer is on annual leave at the moment. I was asked at the last minute to step in and answer any questions the board may indeed have with regards to the application. I did take an opportunity this morning to familiarise myself with the application and with the the acoustic reports that were actually submitted to both support the application, as well as the acoustic report that was submitted by the main objectors. I think maybe to answer your question, in one of the acoustic reports provided to support the application, the acoustic consultant did actually do a noise survey where he considered the existing noise levels. But what he also did is in the noise survey, he assumed a worst case scenario of for a busy restaurant of between 75 and 80, which is actually much higher than their existing noise levels. He then did a distance calculation to the closest sensory receptor, which I believe is about, is some distance away, resulting in an attenuation, a noise drop-off with distance of 31 decibels. And the data reported to us in the report suggests that the predicted noise levels at the closest sensory receptor at night would be 49 decibels. And to put that into context, when they did the background noise measurements at the closest sensory receptors, they had a measured average daytime level of 59 decibels during the day and 57 decibels during the night. So the acoustic consultant's report suggests to me that even assuming the worst case scenario of a busy restaurant operating at about 75 to 80 decibels, you're going to have the noise levels at the closest receptor would be far less than the existing noise than the levels at the current noise levels at the receptors. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Appreciate that. Councillor Rice.
Yeah, is there anything in there about, so in terms of the roof being retracted then, how significant would that be? If that was full and the roof was retracted, do you think that would be significant?
So that's assuming the worst case scenario. So that's assuming the worst case scenario. That's assuming with the roof retracted. I think if the roof were in, we would obviously get much better sound attenuation. So that's my reading of the report is that's actually assuming the worst case scenario, which will be with the roof retracted.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that the in excess of 200 objectors who took the time to write in would entirely disagree with Councillor O'Neill's statements, to be honest. It's one thing approving a contemporary design in a conservation area in isolation, and a completely different thing putting a contemporary design on a locally listed building, a very prominent locally listed building. I'd be very interested to hear the Conservation Officer's comments on why she feels that it's against our planning policies. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. At that time, I will call in the Conservation Officer. She was there. Oh, Margot?
Yes.
Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Would you like to comment, please?
Yes, of course. So we've objected on the grounds. The new decking in particular on the promenade elevation will wrap itself around the whole of the building, and there'll be very little of the roof exposed because the decking actually goes well above the eaves line of the roof. So in actual fact, it pretty well obliterates the appearance of the building from the promenade. Also, the materials are all very modern. They're aluminum cladding, aluminum framing around all of the glazing, which is a gray color. And I understand all the decorative details on the building, which are blue, they'll be picked out in gray to obviously to match in with the cladding and all of the glazed framing. And the decking will be faced with reclaimed timber, which is not in use on the site at all. It's a 1930s interwar building, which is very simply rendered in white render. So the stone cladding that is on the promenade side of the building, which is the retaining wall, will be concealed behind reclaimed timber cladding. So this will give the whole building a really different appearance from its existing appearance, and it will, yes, look very very modern and contemporary. So in fact, you really won't see any of the building from the promenade except for obviously the roof. And essentially, the promenade is the side where most people experience the building from the seaside. They don't tend to dwell in the car park to experience the building from that elevation. So I appreciate the front, that is the Pinecliff Road elevation, won't be altered in any significant way, but the promenade elevation will be more or less concealed behind the decking, which is why we've objected, really, because it takes away a lot of the character and a lot of the appearance of the existing building and transforms it into something quite modern.
Thank you very much, Margaret.
I'd just be interested to know the planning policies that Margot feels that it is contrary to. Thank you.
Did you hear that, Margaret?
Yeah, so the main policy is PP30. That's our heritage asset policy. And that policy stipulates that we are to preserve the character and appearance of all of our heritage assets. That is locally listed and listed heritage assets.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's not about trees. I don't actually like the existing extension that's there now, and that's the former borough of Poole that isn't where we are today. So I've got no problem bringing them into disrepute. So I suspect who is chairing that meeting. Moving on, I'd like to forward a motion that we refuse this application, Chairman, because it's contrary to PP30. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder at this moment in time for that move? If not, we will continue with the debate. No seconder. Therefore, that move cannot go forward at this time. So we will go back to members for further debates. Anyone else wish to comment, please? Councillor O'Neill, followed by Councillor Hilliard, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I suppose a couple of other points are that during the recent heavy rains and storms, the building has not been watertight, and this proposed design, the decking at the front, etc., will address that. So much so that 2 or 3 weeks ago, when we had the heavy rains, I visited this site only to find water inside the building along the front that had blown in and under the doors at the front. So that needs addressing. In terms of local parking and traffic, just further along from this site is Branksome Dean, and quite a lot of the parking that takes place in the surrounding roads, including Westminster Road, are people either going down to Branksome Dean, which has got a very small car park, or walking just down the hill to Branksome Shrine. So I think there's some confusion over traffic and parking, and the options are many. But this site is so popular, and it's really a problem in peak season, if there is a problem. But it's so popular, people will park up to half a mile plus away in order to come down to this location. The catering facility to meet the existing demand in peak season is not big enough. So I actually think this is quite a sensible development in terms of the increase in covers, and it will meet the demand that is placed through the peak season. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hilliard, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question relates to section 56. So there's mention of permitted development rights. Now, obviously, my understanding residential, but just the officer could just confirm what is allowed on a commercial building like this, please.
Sophie, could you come back on that, please?
Yeah, I would need to double check, but as far as the painting goes, it can all be done under permitted development. It being in a conservation area does not affect planning rights for any permitted development or deemed consent.
So are you saying, so the change of materials could probably happen, and similarly some sort of extension could happen under permitted? Thank you.
Again, I would need to double check.
Okay, if you could have a quick look on that, Sophie, if you could do it briefly, that would be really helpful.
And then just a following up question relates to, there's a takeaway service at the moment, and obviously a lot of objectors mentioned the loss of the takeaway service, and looking at the building, I can't see that there's going to be a takeaway service anymore. So that is obviously a change, and I think probably the flow of people it is a loss. So I don't think it's a like for like. So it'd be I'd not like to see that loss of the takeaway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a couple of things, I think that the big thing for me is the heritage asset. But for me, the heritage, the benefits that we get from the heritage of that building are from the frontage towards the road, not the frontage towards the promenade. I think that the vast majority of the benefits we get and the historical benefits of that building were erased when the current extension was put on there. I think that erased the vast majority of the real architectural merit of that building facing the frontage. So I think that the fact that it's been quite sympathetic to the front of the building, which is very architecturally significant in my opinion, minus the couple of parasols to the sides, which I think are a bit of a non-issue. I think that it's quite a good. I think it's quite a good development. I personally quite like that contemporary style. And when you look at the pictures that Sophie showed from the beach view, you can see that the only residential developments that are in visual view behind it are of a more contemporary design. And so I don't think it looks particularly out of place with the more contemporary design there. And I think that it was mentioned, it was a little bit of an argument about whether it's intensification or not. I think it is an intensification, but I don't see why that's necessarily a bad thing. If we can keep that place running as a restaurant and as a successful restaurant, I think that's much more of a benefit than we'll get from seeing a couple of flaky Branksome Chine Beach cafe signs. It's I think it's about striking a balance here. We've got to keep the building within its own time. We've got to keep it moving, and sometimes that does mean changing it a little bit. And so I think the benefits of this do outweigh the conservation concerns, and I just think that that extension that's already there for me has ruined any chance of it being rejected on conservation grounds when that's the only view being changed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Sophie, would you like to come back?
Yeah, so just to clarify, the extensions and cladding wouldn't, but the painting could be done under permitted development.
Councillor Leon? Yep, okay. So, member, anyone else wishing to comment? Before you do it, I'm just going to say a few quick words. I didn't particularly like the aesthetic of the new part of the building, but I'm sure it will grow on me. I think it will be a benefit to the area. I mean, people are quite right in what I've heard this morning, that the part of the building that there is now is probably past its sell-by date. And I think there is some merit in the fact that when somebody tried to get it listed, it was rejected to be listed. And I think that's quite an important factor for us to think about. If the Natural England and the Heritage thought it was such a good building, I'm sure they would have listed it. So from that perspective, I'm not too concerned about losing that and having the new frontage there. It is a great venue. Let's face it, it's in an ideal position. Where else can you go and sit somewhere like that? And the parking side of it is people that are going to go there are not necessarily all going to go there by car. A lot of those people that use that car are going there because they're going onto the beach itself, not necessarily to go to that restaurant. I think people that go there have always managed to find themselves somewhere to park, and quite often it's actually people that are on the beach suddenly think, let's go inside and have some nice lunch. So they're already there anyway. The customers to that area are almost a captured market. They're actually on the seafront anyway. And a lot of them are local people that will and are capable of walking to that venue. There's a decent bus service that goes down there. There's a good taxi service that goes down there. So from that perspective, I'm not too worried about the transport side of that and the movement of people around the area. We haven't had a move to go on to this yet. I think that I am minded to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation, and I will move that we grant this application. Councillor Johnson?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chris, was there something you wanted to? You're okay. No, I'm just about to do it now. So I will move to grant the officer's recommendation, and I will thank the officer for this one again. It seems today that we've had the A-team of planning officers on this committee today because they've all done some really, really good reports, and I really am thankful for that. It's making our lives much, much easier. So thank you for that. So members, with that said, I will go to the vote on this. And again, Councillor Barron. Yeah, please do.
I'd just like to say, well, sort of question, what's the point in having a heritage of, the heritage officer if people don't listen to them and officers don't? There's things that in Margot's report that haven't been put into the officer's information pack. So I just sort of deeply uncomfortable with the situation.
I think that you have to bear in mind.
I'm sort of seeing where this is going.
Yeah, but you've obviously read Margot's report.
I have.
So therefore, there was no need for that to be repeated in the officer's report.
Yeah, but
because you've had it.
Yes, but Chairman, to source that, I had to look up the application online.
Yep.
And download that.
As we all have done.
Well, yeah, that's questionable.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll move to the vote on this. Councillor Barron.
Against.
Councillor Bull. Against. Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Hilliard.
For.
Councillor Lawton.
For.
Councillor Lepedevin.
For.
Councillor O'Neill.
For.
Councillor Rice.
Against.
Councillor Trent. For. Councillor Johnson. For. And myself also for. Can I get the numbers, please, John?
So that's 9 votes in favour and 3 against, so that move is carried.
So that application is granted in line with the officer's recommendation, and that draws us to the conclusion of today's applications. But before we all disappear, I would just like to say a couple of words, if I may, and that is to offer my thanks to Nick Perrins, who has sat here today on his last planning meeting. Nick will be leaving to move on to sunnier climes of Oxfordshire. And I'd personally like to thank him for the help he's given me over the time that I've worked with him. It's been really, really acceptable, and really grateful for your help on that, Nick, and I wish you the best of luck in the future. And at the same time, I'm going to ask Sam to introduce our new person.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased that we have Edward Oteng sitting to my left. And Edward joined us at the beginning of last week as interim development management manager. So he will be taking the lead officer role at planning committee. I'll still be attending planning committee and making initiatives of myself, but certainly Edward is picking up a lot of the operational DM stuff, which I'm very pleased to say he's already started making a really positive impact. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome along, Edward. You're going to be a huge asset, I'm sure, and we'll look forward to seeing you at future planning meetings, etc. So with that said, I will wish you all a very happy Christmas and look forward to seeing you all in the new year. And this meeting is